from CDX, yeah, you gotta show your flex. Running up, you say $1 million projects. AI agents with the checks, they just get the best. Big Tony on my mind, making plays while we rest. Big Tony on my mind, making plays when we rest. Let's go. Everything gets that Eddie usual like Big Tony. Only get up for a 10p, we rich as fuck. Getting money, foreign tax, Big Tony. Feeling good, run a pack out, marvelous boatloads. When they wanna sell out, that's what we buy it for. When they wanna sell it, we apply major pressure. Cons play games, someone get the stretcher. And now the song holding Seminole to measure. Bitch, we bout to get it. My bitch sounding like cash machines, 1,000 of them. Ain't slept for a couple weeks, 1,000 of them. Instead of fucking on pockets, permanent gains. I said naturally good, how we really became. We rich DDR, CDX world. This what you call taking over the world. Big Tony on. Lost my mind with stadiums of this love. Big Tony, Big T, whoever knew this was in store. All this power can't ignore. Cut this out from ground floor. Still so much room for more. Hold up, powerful. AA agents with the checks, they just get the best. Okay. Big Tony on my mind, making plays while we rest. Big Tony on my mind, making plays when we rest. Let's go. I'm soaring high like a kite. When you rich from CDX, yeah.
Well, welcome to the 2025 DeFi AI Summit, presented by Codex, hosted by yours truly, discount game host Corval. While memes have been raising quite a stink the last couple of weeks, developers, investors, and founders in the know have been quietly, sometimes not so quietly, hard at work building an exciting new blockchain sector with DeFi AI. But what is DeFi AI? How do you pronounce it? Is it just hot air? Who is it for more? Who is it for? And more will be answered over the next 3 hours across 3 panel discussions, where we'll be focusing on product, investment, and infrastructure. So we are ecstatic and incredibly grateful to have some of the leading minds in DeFi AI here to clear the air and shoot the breeze with us for this live event. This is an open discussion, so if you have any questions at home, please drop them in the chat and we'll try to work them into discussion as best as we're able. For those of you in the audience right now, please drop some fire flame emojis in the chat so I know you're with me. And with that, let's get this thing started. Now, starting with the product panel, we're going to be discussing kind of how we can get a grasp on DeFi AI and what it can do for you. And to that end, we've got Yash Agarwal with us, co-founder of Send AI Fund and the non-official CMO for Solana. We are also joined by Ed Chang, former head of gaming for AVAX and the current COO of Sofon. We've also got Christina, formerly working PR in the fashion industry, so I hope she likes my tie, and current CMO of Cookie3. And finally, we've got Lincoln Murr rounding out the panel, founder of Vandy Blockchain, an Ethereum fellowship researcher, and a product and AI manager at Coinbase. So let's get these people on the screen here. And let's get this thing started. Oh, we also got a special guest here, a surprise secret special guest that might be known to you if you watch the show regularly. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sitting through that long introduction. Hope you all are doing well. Large panel here. Is everyone's mic working? Seems everyone is muted.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Just
Yeah.
looking for a little
All right,
feedback
wonderful.
here.
Hey,
Nice. Well, I hope you guys are ready to get started. Let's start with something kind of easy here. Let's just break the ice because we haven't even chatted before. How do you pronounce this DFAI? Let's go around real quick. I'll start with you, Ed Chang, to my right.
When I pronounce it, I tend to just draw out the last syllable. So I say DeFi, and that way, people understand it's not just DEFI.
Yeah, spread it out a little bit. Yash, what about you?
I think DeFi, that's what like most of the people have been pronouncing. So yeah.
Okay. Lincoln?
I'm pretty biased towards agent fi or AI fi actually.
Oh,
Like the DeFi one, it feels like one of those things where if you can't say it, it's not going to catch on. So I'm hoping somebody will come to a consensus on this here soon.
this is the spot to do it. Let's get to it. We should dig into that a little bit more. Beebus, you next. How do you pronounce this new vocab term?
So I think myself and a lot of people are on the same page as Lincoln, but I don't have enough clout to kind of redirect the stream of consciousness here. But so I go with DeFi. I'm with Yash on this one. I think Ed's is pretty good though. DeFi. It's very dramatic.
Yeah. And Christina, what do you think about this term and how would you pronounce it?
Hi. So most of the time, I think I say DeFi AI, just to be clear. But I've also caught myself a couple of times saying DefAI. So I don't think I've chosen my favorite way to say it yet. I switch.
Right on. I think we're going to hear a lot of different ways of saying it over the next couple hours here. I'm flip-flopping myself. But now let's get into the real meat of it here. Now I got your valuable time here. I'd like to start with you, Christina. Our first question on the list here is, would you use an AI agent to manage your finances? And why or why not?
Yes, in the future, when there is one that can do it properly, I just don't feel the technology is there yet. I feel we're getting there. Right now, most of the crypto AI agents are focused on mind churn and social data. We're seeing a couple of agents pop up that are supposed to be on-chain agents right now, but I guess I would need to see how well they act on all the data that they can access. And I just don't feel the market's there yet. But we've just wrapped up the Cookie DeFi AI hackathon, and there were some really promising agents there. So in the future, 100%, I'm really bad, especially if there are like airdrops or anything, and you need to do it at a certain time or a certain hour, or, being there to make the trade. I feel like I'm just too busy with my work and I'm always lagging behind. So if I could outsource it to an agent that would execute my strategy, then yes, but the tech needs to get there first.
I see. And feel free to respond to anyone here if you have something that you want to say. Don't wait. You don't have to wait for me to call on you. Feel free to hop in on it. I'm kind of curious to what you believe. Like, so the current state you say is more of just kind of reading data and pulling it in, but not really actioning on it. Do you think anything from the Cookie Hackathon specifically kind of really evidenced this kind of actionable agent behavior?
So I really liked. They joined the hackathon being called Sentience, but now they just rebranded to Agents Ops, I think. I think they have very promising tech, and also Kudo that took the third place in the hackathon, and the Cookie fun track was really interesting. There was a lot of projects that are basically saying they are building like trading agents. But it's like there is in general a lot of projects that are building this. It's just I'm waiting for a project that is going to build this and it's going to work pretty accurately.
Now, Lincoln, have you seen any projects that you think are kind of running in this kind of thing? Or I guess let me rewind. Would you let an AI agent manage your finances to begin with?
I think yes, depending on the scope and complexity of what I'm looking for. Like the ability for me to give an AI access to my funds and tell it to just go make me money exists today. And while I don't think it'll ever be great at doing trading or any of these more like proprietary activities that today are primarily done by hedge funds, I think that'll stay that way. I do think that like DeFi yields in general, like lending and borrowing and earning activities, which are all possible today, still represent like a significant advantage over the traditional way that money is managed. And apologies if there's background noise. I'm sitting down at the airport right now. But yeah, I think like the very basics of this like agent fi, whatever you want to call it, stuff is here, and it allows for immediate benefits over existing traditional financial systems. Is it good enough to be used by a billion people in a mass adoption manner? I don't think so, but that's more of a problem of user experience and user interface than it is actual technological innovation at the agent level.
Gotcha. So we're still experiencing this kind of UI UX problem and kind of just scaling this whole thing up. Yash, what about you? Do you think you would allow an AI agent to manage your finances, and why not, or why so?
Yeah, not yet. Obviously, in the near future, yes. I think like currently, if you see like more the LLMs are probabilistic in nature, but DeFi is deterministic in nature. So if you allow LLM to like give inputs to a DeFi protocol, it would hallucinate a lot of times, and it wouldn't be like deterministic in nature, right? So I think like currently we need like lot of specialized agents for each of the DeFi actions. And then I think like we can have like something like agent orchestration and so on, which like orchestrates around different particular specific agents. And as always, like everyone has been saying that agents would be vertical. So I think like most of these DeFi agents would be vertical and specific for a certain task. And then you can orchestrate between things. But I think like the biggest mismatch here is the probabilistic part of LLMs and the deterministic part of DeFi. I think like we need to bridge that gap and figure out a way like where basically these agents can take deterministic actions very well. And obviously the tooling isn't there yet, like the tools aren't very compatible, and we still see a lot of hallucination whenever we try to call a particular tool via LLM. So I think like yeah, there's a lot of improvement needs to be done. I think the infra is not ready for agents to manage funds yet.
I see. So I think we're starting to see a consensus emerge here. Infrastructure is not quite ready. There's still a lot of risks. Ed, Chang, thank you for joining us. Thank you for waiting till the very end to give us your take. Would you let an agent manage your finances? And do you see any problems other than what's been mentioned so far with agents, and why you maybe wouldn't let them manage your finances?
Yeah, I don't have too much to offer in addition to what the esteemed panel has covered already. But I do think that there are, I think right now I would trust like small specific use cases, right? Like small agent executions, right? Like for example, if someone could, if there was an agent that could take my money and ape into everything on Moonshot as soon as it listed, right? Like that specific meme coin vertical, like that makes a lot of sense to do. But I think when you think about a 360 like replacement for a wealth manager or someone to invest kind of the macro of your finances, you look at something in Web 2 like Wealthfront, right? Like I think there's still a huge human element to that. And I think the tech side really unlocks and enables a lot of that stuff. I think anytime you talk about crypto, though, you think about things that aren't deep tech, things like, okay, well, all it takes is one of these things to get hacked, and then I'm pulling all my money off because I don't own that, right? Like, was it not your keys, not your crypto, right? So there needs to be a high level of trust, not just in the tech working and functioning as is, but like the audits being proper and like the branding and then the actual performance, if you will. So those are some of the things that I would think about more on like the ops and general like branding and feeling side versus like in addition to the tech pieces that everyone's talked about.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like what we're kind of getting a picture of here is an extremely nascent stage of development here. Not quite a one size fits all solution yet, very specific. And there still needs to be a lot of work done on the infrastructure, branding, and productization of this. Now, my next question would be like, what is then probably the next step? What would be the first thing to focus on specifically? Is it these specific use cases, like say targeting a specific meme coin launch type thing, or where should the development efforts be focused at for developing this new vertical? I'll start off with Lincoln, right below me, dude. What do you think?
Yeah, generally I balk at the idea of like bringing in financial aspects around meme coins. Like I think a lot of what makes it fun, and this is another conversation entirely, is just like the gambling speculation aspect of it. As soon there goes the airport, but as soon as people start trying to take this seriously, I think
It shows the hell of times.
Yeah, I think it becomes a huge issue pretty quickly when you're trying to financialize meme coins. Generally, I think the way this should start is with very simple DeFi activities like depositing into an Aave vault or a Morpho vault or something like that. The activities that have the biggest impact that aren't necessarily terribly difficult, I would like shy away from trading or anything that requires some level of like logic to it. Instead, treating these agents as a translation from natural language into very simple actions you can take on chain.
Interesting. So much more directional, like I'm just telling it what specifically to do. Yash, what about you? What do you think is probably the key thing to be focusing on if you're building an AI DeFi stuff right now?
I think the biggest problem needs to be solved on the tooling layer. So like we improved the tool calling by this models or LLMs. So I think like before we move on to the agentic part of it, like where we deploy a lot of DeFi agents, I think like the tool calling needs to be improved a lot. Because when we saw at the Solana AI hackathon as well, many we had 3 tracks related to DeFi agents, and we saw a lot of DeFi agents, but none of them were production friendly because they were failing at the tool calling layer and so on. So I think like we need to like make sure that these models have all the context. And I think like one thing that here also can be that fine tuning the models, just making sure that they're very good on all this tool calling. So I think like that needs to be there so that like these models have all the context on like different blockchain actions that can be taken, and this is way less hallucination. I think like still like agents are something that we won't see like very in the immediate future, because even in the normal AI landscape we haven't seen a full-fledged agentic systems yet. Like agents still can't book a flight on their own and so on. So I think like it's still very far that we see a full-fledged DeFi hedge fund. So I think like yeah, like there's a lot of work needs to be on the tool calling side, and then like we can like keep building like specific verticalized agents, like let's say something like launching a token or this is performing some simple actions. But I think like these are currently like more on the bot side rather than on the agent side, since yeah, like these are performing very specific actions and there's very less on the thinking part of it. It's more on the executional part of it.
Okay, so way more on the tooling side, very specific use cases. This is kind of what we're looking at right now. So in terms of like a product, as a North Star for a product, what would you measure as kind of like success or progress towards this endpoint, would you say? Would you say there's anything really kind of performing in this direction right now?
I think like on the product side, like there can be like 2 ways. So for one thing can be on the tool calling side, that is like how they are interacting with different protocols. Another can be on the thinking part of it. So on the thinking part of it, it's basically just making sure that like we have better and better models like fine tuned for this specific use case, or just like better prompt engineering as well. And on the executional side, I think like it's more on like how do you interact with SDKs, what are the different SDKs which are available for interacting with these and so on. So I think like it's like basically working on both the direction on the executional side as well as on the thinking side of it. So yeah, I think like currently the focus I think should be more on the executional side of the things, because that's like more on the it's more mimicking a bot behavior. But I think like that already has a PMF. Like bots already have been working well in crypto, and like there's a bot for almost everything. So I think like people should like focus more on like building better and better on the execution side, and then they can keep focusing on the thinking part of it and making them more and more autonomous. So it would be basically evolving from bots to agents. So like earlier, like just keep building like better bots, and then like they would evolve into a better agent going forward.
I see. So focusing on the execution and working backwards from there to the thinking, making sure it can actually execute this stuff first. Interesting. Now, Christina, what about you? What do you think would make like a knockout AI product at this stage, DeFi AI product at this stage? What should these builders be kind of really optimizing for?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I sort of want to second Lincoln here, who said, about the agent just doing transactions on chain, because I feel many of us are going super like futuristic, thinking about agents trading, and right now the barrier to entry to crypto, like, it's high. Like, I can't imagine my mom using a wallet and then bridging tokens, but my mom talks to an LLM. Like, if she could tell it what to do and it could do it for her, for me that's like a first step towards making crypto more accessible to the mainstream. But then building up on this, what the next step would be, and I think like a big breakthrough would be for agents right now, would be, it doesn't have to be necessarily super complex. But if I was talking to my, LLM agent that has some on-chain automation, and then not everyone understands the market really well. So, for example, being able to tell the agent, I don't know, oh, I want to trade tokens that have like AI agent tokens that have the highest mindshare right now. And then this agent being able to tap into the vast data sources that it understands, that I, as a user, I don't have to understand the market or trading that well, but I can have an idea of what I want to trade. And then the agent could tap into certain databases, analyze it, and then make the trades as I command it to, as my vision is, without me having to understand the exact market dynamics. That would be pretty cool.
Interesting. I feel like this is a little bit different than what Yash is saying. So I kind of find this difference in opinion a little bit interesting. If maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of saying the thinking side is probably the area that you'd be most excited to see this kind of development in, if it can process this data and kind of give you some effective analysis, and then just direct it to where to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Ed? What are you looking for? I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit in your original answer, but do you want to expand a little bit?
Yeah, I think any good panel needs somebody zagging when everybody's zigging, and I think can't go toe to toe with the rest of this panel on the kind of the deep tech and discussing the ins and outs of LLMs and AI. But I think we are building a consumer chain here at SoFun, right? And like, what do we care about? We care about retail and consumers coming here and doing stuff and adding value on all sides of that equation, right? And I think that sometimes if we get into the nitty gritty of like, which LLM is better, which, framework are you using? It reminds me a little bit of, this company called Juicero with that, like, raised this VC funding, like $50 million to build this really cool smoothie maker. And you had to buy their special packs, but they found out you could just like squeeze the packs. And then it's like, everyone was like, okay, well, all this tech, like, what did it actually do for me? Right. And so I think like for me, the answer is probably still the same, which is, if you ask most, even people within crypto, you ask me even, like, what is the most commonly used crypto AI app? Like, I'd probably tell you like AI XBT or something, right? It's just like people tweet at this guy and he shit posts sometimes and people get alpha from that. And like, that feels like the most mainstream use case there. But like, if someone came to me and said, hey, there's this DeFi or DeFai agent, right, that can increase your yield by 10, 20% APY a year. And the reason they can do that is because you don't have to sit there and like, compound like your DeFi, or you don't need to like collect your yield and re-add it to the pool and things like that. Or, it's got a certain edge in certain types of things, or it can kind of play the arbitrage and find where the best stablecoin yields are. Like, that speaks to me, right? And so like actually just coming in with this use case that people can actually speak to like the lay person. That's what I think is what I'd be really interested in. And then in terms of like the North Star, well, I think AI was really hot for a while because the price action of, AI 16Z and virtuals and all these other AI tokens. But then since it's kind of like a lot of that token price is cratered, it doesn't feel like the narrative has necessarily come back. And that's probably a mismatch in terms of the actual adoption or usage that people use versus speculation. And so I would just look at, are people actually using this thing, even though, the tokens haven't ripped to their, all-time high FDVs again, because that to me signals that there's actual adoption and there's actual use cases and value, if you will, for people using these dApps.
Fantastic. I think this is a nice kind of distinction that we're kind of getting here, which is, do we want the hammer to work properly, or do you want people to be able to use it? Right? Like, do we want it to be as effective at executing as possible, or do we want it to be, is that something that even the people want? Like, are we building for the market, or are we trying to build the next tool? Beavis, what about you? What do you think is the next, is your North Star for DeFi AI? DeFi AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little bit in Ed's camp here. We started off years ago essentially building declarative intents, which is what Lincoln is talking about, using AI, using RAG to distill meaning from arbitrary prompts. And in testing this with users, they didn't care that much. It was like, okay, you type this in, you wait 20, 30 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, and you have some outcome. And for a lot of the current obtainable market, they can do that in 5 seconds on a traditional UI. And then talking about like the complexity, we originally started building because it's expensive to develop vaults and strategies in the yield aggregation business. And where we've gotten to now has really been reinforced mostly by user retention and users getting excited. And, when we gave people the ability to develop their trading strategies with natural language and just deploy agents and send them off and literally say, go make me money, and them seeing better outcomes, them seeing really high quality technical analysis, them having access to more data more quickly, we saw users like jumping for joy because they don't need to wait for the response. They're saying, go out and do the thing. And so that's why we've really, really kind of drilled in on trading as the core use case and user retention as basically the core metric, being if I'm a user and I onboard, it's not necessarily I'm having a better outcome day one, especially if you're a good trader, but it's more so, can I see the path if I learn this tool to have a better outcome? And users are seeing that. And so that's kind of become huge for us. And I echo Yash and Lincoln's and Ed's sentiments entirely. It's like, all of these tools I think are important in creating accessible AI tech for finance specifically. And I'm a really strong believer that the determinism of blockchain and DeFi solves for and doesn't necessarily make more difficult the probabilism of AI. And thus you have TradFi. I don't care how many beautiful APIs you've strung together, you're not going to get the same security guarantees for financial agents as you can on blockchain. And so, yeah, everybody's right. I think for us, it is really about, I used Cursor for the first time, and I can see myself, if I learn how to use it well, being a 10x engineer. I want people to use Codex for the first time, for example, and see themselves becoming an elite trader.
Beavis here being quite the politician, trying to synthesize these two viewpoints together into a cohesive whole. So I guess the question is, like, which is most important up front, right? Is the capability or the appeal? When we look at like other AI products that are successful, right? I'm kind of, look, I'm not the panel, so I shouldn't be putting my opinion in here. But if we were to look at something like ChatGPT, Dolly, these things that really got mass appeal and adoption, it was because of easy to use and they could get things immediately, right? That they could even just look at. Particularly ChatGPT, it answers questions. Do you think how close do you think we are to getting the thinking part, as Yash put it, working for these AI agents? I'll throw it to you, Yash, because I mentioned you. Do you think you were talking about the execution, but do you think the thinking is lagging that far behind?
I think that depends. So, for example, when we tested with Solana Agent Kit, like all the models, currently we have like Anthropic both Sonnet as well as like other models as like one of the top models, like which were better at tool calling as compared to the other models we tested with. So yeah, I think like on the thinking part, like there needs to be a lot of work done because all these models don't have like a lot of context on like how to exactly interact with blockchains and so on. So and another thing, like we were also testing with other models, and Perplexity was also doing pretty well here, just because like Perplexity has like live search data and it can then like do a good job on the qualitative side, but not on the quantitative side. I think like a lot of these models lack like how to exactly like optimize for yields or all the blockchain actions. So I think like someone needs to do a proper fine tuning of these models, and then only like this would be better at like doing like all the blockchain actions. But I would say like currently like most of these blockchains lack like good context on this thing, and most of the teams are currently just using prompt engineering to make sure like they would be able to do like some actions, and some are doing like just like hard coding as well, like which again like defeats the purpose of having having an LLM. So I think yeah, there needs to be like a lot of work done on that side of the things to make sure that these agents can think well on their own.
Interesting. I feel like kind of what you're getting at when you're saying like the hard coding part of it, like we have to have kind of a distinction between like why an LLM versus just a regular bot, right? I could just hard code something to do something for me, but why an LLM over a bot? Lincoln, do you have a take on this, like with the thinking aspect of these AI agents? Do you think we're kind of approaching a part where you could get useful, actionable information, or are they glorified bots at this point?
I think generally there's the assumption being made that we're going to see better and better AI models over time, much in we assume in crypto that we're going to get blockchains that scale to the billion users that we want to see. As a part of this, I think we'll naturally be able to use them for more specific crypto applications. I know there are like crypto specific models or RAG databases like ThirdWeb's Nebula that are being created to address this exact problem. Generally, it's not something that I worry about, and like more so, I think it's important that we have the technical infrastructure in place on our side of things, such that when these agents are able to start reasoning properly, that they have the tools and capabilities to use that reasoning to do practical, valuable things, as opposed to just like speculatively deploying tokens.
Interesting. Ed, what about you? Do you think that the thinking aspect of these agents is really lagging far behind? Would you trust an agent to do some analysis for you on what trades to get in and out of?
Yeah, on the analysis side, I mean, I don't have, in general, not too much to add beyond what everybody said, but yeah, I think so. You know, I think if you look at the way a lot of these LLMs can like think through things, I think like the latest Google tech is pretty insane, where you can like effectively give it an MBA case study and it can like break down all these things much better than a team of MBAs can. No offense to anybody with an MBA, like that stuff is crazy, right? And so I think there's a lot of translation and a lot of crossover in terms of what you can unlock with DeFi and all that.
Interesting. I gotcha. Hear you loud and clear. I feel like there's like some excitement here, but as Yash was saying, we got to have like better connections, because it can't analyze the data if it can't even access it, right? Is kind of my understanding when we're talking about the tooling, how to actually hook it up to these different sources. Beavis, do you have anything to add on this? And I'm going to go back to you, Yash. I feel like you had something you want to say. Actually, let me go down to Yash first. Yash,
Okay.
you have some?
I don't know. I was just agreeing to that, but yeah, like on basically like this, all these models like good read access as well as write access, and I think like then they would be able to interact with blockchains much more on a better way.
Fantastic. I'm glad I'm out of my intellectual. Ed keeps saying he's out of his depth here, but I'm way out of my depth here, bro. I got the floaties on in the pool, but I'm in the deep end. Beavis, what about you? What do you think about the thinking capability of agents as they exist now? And do you think we have much further to go before we have tooling that makes it so they can make actually effective, insightful, and accurate analysis for us?
Yeah. I mean, I share a lot of Yash's opinions about this with regards to like what the next steps are. We did a lot of fine tuning early on building Codex, and we found that it yielded much worse results than just engineering the perfect context and having the perfect data. And I think especially when you talk about deploying multi-agent systems, wherein each agent is able to scope its context to a very specific purpose, and you can pass data between those agents, that to me is a good immediate next step that doesn't require improvements to LLMs, that doesn't require huge, training costs, et cetera. And that is accomplishable right now, because, we find that there's not really a lot you can do to make a model perform better than GPT-4o. And really the only reason you would want to train maybe a smaller model is to save money. At least in our experience. So we're really excited about finding ways to make context more concise, to improve the quality of context, to give users the tools they need to create perfect prompts. And we think that's how they're going to think better. And then I think at the API level, you can borrow a lot from algo traders. You can borrow a lot from bots in terms of how am I going to control risk? How am I going to control security? How am I going to ensure that, these agents, these probabilistic agents, have these sanity checks when they're actually broadcasting transactions that ensure that, you're not swept up in a hallucination or there's nothing like crazy being done with your funds. So I think long term, it's all going to be about, like Lincoln is saying, getting bigger, better models, getting better data, higher quality resources overall. But in the meantime, I think mastering your context is really how you get the step change improvements in your agent performance.
Right on, right on. Before I move on, anyone want to tag on to that, challenge that, anything? Okay, moving on. I went off script here. Sorry, guys. I was just so in the moment wanting to learn more. What is a signal you're looking for that will make you feel comfortable that there's real product market fit at the intersection of crypto and AI? Ed, I'll throw this to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a different narrative going on in crypto, and it feels like it moves faster and faster these days of what all the capital is rotating into, right? I feel like it went from like meme coins to AI back to meme coins super fast, right? But I think number one is in kind of what the Twitter sphere and the public is saying. I think the moment you start to see some investment poured directly into maybe like DeFi AI type startups, I think that part becomes really interesting. And then I think maybe more of a reach one is, I think when you start to see maybe even like crypto company like treasuries be put with maybe some of these DeFi agents, right? I think a problem right now is you tend to put everything in stables because you're scared of things getting blown up or smart contract risk or impermanent loss or things like that. But if you have ideally a very strong, algo, you have very strong tech behind it, and overall a great DeFi agent, there's no reason why it can't kind of mitigate some of this risk. If it's a really strong product, you could probably get insurance behind it as well. So that would be kind of maybe more out there type thing that I would love to see, that feels like, okay, like this stuff is really happening, and there's momentum behind it.
I like it. He's saying, put your money where your mouth is. Go ahead, Beavis. Sorry.
Yeah, I think if we see really astute risk managers allocating funds to AI agents, like I totally agree. That's like, big shining light. Like, dude, there's something here. Like if we see Karpathy put like Gnosis funds or MakerDAO funds or something into an agent, I think that's like, okay, the biggest signal we can get. And we, in the first question, we all talked about this. It's like, it's so experimental right now. I don't think anybody's going to put more than a few $1,000s into an agent. People are allocating to it like they do Telegram bots or sniper bots or some of these other types of software, where it's like, hey, like I know this thing is going to be capable of doing something, and so maybe I'll take a punt with it, and maybe I'll see some return, maybe I won't. And I think that's where we're at now, at kind of the bleeding edge, and the goal is just to expand until you've got TradFi hedgies eating $1 million into AIXBT fund.
Nice. Now, Lincoln, what do you think? Do you think that Beavis and Ed are right here that they got to put their money where their mouth is? That's going to be the sign that we've reached product market fit?
I think that pretty much nails it on the head in terms of true product market fit. What I'd like to see in Signal to get to that direction is people just like using agents and playing around with them, and whether or not they put a lot of capital in them, just understanding like how easy it is today already to deploy an agent. Like for Agent Kit, it takes literally 5 minutes on docs.cdp.coinbase.com. Not to shill, but I just think like the ability of people to create these agents and do it so simply is not understood by mouth, and that it requires no coding experience. Everyone can get started today and start playing around with it. And once we have a lot of people understanding the current capabilities, then we have builders who are starting to realize where the gaps are and find products that can get them value by covering those gaps. Then we'll get a lot closer to the vision of every single person having an AI agent, if not multiple, getting a billion AI agents on chain, and ultimately giving institutions and DAOs and treasuries the comfort and confidence to start allocating capital to them.
Fantastic. I like this. We're talking mass adoption here. We're talking big guys adoption, the masses playing around with these toys. Yash, what about you? How do you feel about this? Very broad question to throw you.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I think like obviously like we need more and more toys currently. Like so people should definitely experiment like with all the DeFi agents, and I think like it's an iterative process. Like before someone builds a very good DeFi super app or like basically a agent interface where they can interact with like a lot of different agents, we need to experiment a lot with this individual agent. So I think like yeah, experimentation should go on, and we should see like a lot of people also like putting let's say money on these agents and then see like how these agents are performing. I think like as this agents start performing well, we'll have a lot of data to benchmark these agents also. So I think like currently there's not much focus on like the analytics part of the agents, but I think like that would be a major focus going down the line once we have like good scalable production like friendly agents, that like how these agents are actually performing. There would be like different trust like marketplace of trust sort of thing where like there would be scores attached to different agents. There would be an independent rating agency which are rating these agents and so on. So I think like at the end something like Shopify for agents, or even you can say Amazon for agents, would make a lot of sense, where you can like evaluate different agents and how they are like performing, and then like you can choose like which agents to go on, or which agents to put on, or like which agents you want to fork. So I think like that would be like something like later down the line. Or one thing can also be that all these DeFi protocols start building their own agents. So for example, there's a Jupiter agent like which is like doing like a lot of Jupiter tasks, and yeah, so essentially like all these agents are internalized by the DeFi protocols itself. Just like I think like even in normal world, like you can see that like Figma has their own agents, or Figma has their own LLMs and so on. So I think like there can be a software specific agents which are built by this DeFi protocol itself. So I think like yeah, in the next 6 months, I'm most excited about all the experimentation which will be there in the space, and later on, then we can have we can know the final form factor on like how we will be interacting with this agent, either directly on the protocol website, or a super app sort of interface, or a LLM chat interface, or so on. So I think like the form factor is still unknown, but there has to be like a lot of experimentation before we figure out like what's the best possible way to interact with these agents.
Right on. So we got to see this experimentation play out and see the most acceptable use cases kind of bubble up to the surface here. Do you think there's any reason why we aren't seeing that kind of pickup right now? Is it just because mindshare is captured right now by, I don't know, Trump coin type stuff, or do you think the tech isn't developed enough yet?
Yeah, I think so. What I always say is like it was like wave one of AI agents. So in wave one, we obviously had a lot of fraud and speculation. And even like when we conducted Solana AI hackathon, we knew that like a lot of these agents aren't production friendly, but that was very much needed so that like we can actually see like what are different possibilities and get something going on. So I think like we saw a lot of experimentations, but all of them weren't production friendly. In the wave two, now people have realized what's the shortcomings when they started building these agents, and now people are like again like back to base where they're building all the infrastructure needed for these agents. Some are building on the data layer, some are building on the model layer, some are building on the tooling layer. So I think like a lot of teams are now building. So I think like it's like kind of a build phase where like a lot of people will be building, and I think currently still the prices are still overvalued for most of the agent infra teams or all the tokens. So I think like there needs to be a lot of like more correction, and then like we will have like wave two of the agents, and in that like we'll see some utility agents being popped up where they can actually do some tasks. So I think like we are still 5-6 months down the line for that. And after like I think like then we'll be like having like more and more waves. But currently we are at the end of wave one, where we saw only like fraud and speculation, and obviously there wasn't like anything useful which came out of this wave. But there was a lot of experimentation, and I think like we got almost like 15-20 first of the many first ever use cases of all of this. But I think like yeah, wave two would be like making all this experimentation production friendly, and where they actually perform certain useful tasks.
Fantastic. So I think so we're kind of in the middle of it already. This kind of revolution is already underway, guys. It's only a matter of time before Gnosis has their own agents deployed, if all things work out. But moving along, kind of rubbing up against time here. We do have a question I want to get to, but I guess we'll jump to it now. Internet Capital asks, can you guys talk about risk management and multi-chain agents? And he's seconded by someone saying risk discussion is a very important aspect to AI agents. Now, who should I throw this to? I'll throw this back to you, Yash. Risky or not? Talk to us a little bit about the risk of using multi-chain agents right now. Are they fairly safe, unsafe?
Yeah, I think so. This is again a contrary opinion. Like a lot of this framework and all of the teams like mostly believe that agents would be multi-chain, and the agents would orchestrate or like basically abstract all the multi-chain stuff. But I am of a contrary opinion where I feel that like most of these agents will be chain specific. So for example, even in the apps, like we have seen like a lot of multi-chain apps, but we haven't seen any multi-chain apps which are doing like all the cross-chain interactions at scale. So I think like this agents would also be like chain specific, and either they would be like Solana specific or Base specific or Ethereum specific. Like I think like those would be chain specific. And on the multi-chain agents, I think like still we won't see like lot of multi-chain agents. Like a lot of teams would do, but I think like most of the traffic would come from one chain itself, the chains which they are focusing on. So I think like currently most of the agent teams should just focus on like single chain agents, and obviously they can go multi-chain later down the line. But I think like it's simple as like just like we have like crypto apps that you first focus on one chain and then you can go multi-chain. So I think like same thing would happen here as well, where you would build for a specific chain and then go for multi-chain. On the risk, I think like yeah, there's a lot of focus which would be on the risk side of the agents, but currently we don't have like production friendly agents. So I think like that's the first step, and then the second step would be like how are we like making sure that this agents don't have risk either on the spending control side or on the like lot of like guardrails put in place. But I think like we're still a bit far from that discussion on the risk management side.
I see. Lincoln, do you agree? Are we far from talking about actual operational risk with these agents right now? You mentioned that Agent Kit is allowing people to deploy their agents. How does risk management work into that?
Yeah, good question. I think by default, you don't have any inherent features built in to protect against risk for most of these agents right now. That being said, it's a few lines of code to add in something like, oh, if your agent wants to spend more than $50, then you have to do two-factor authentication with your phone, or you have to approve some push request or some sort of notification or something. Like all of the features for risk management are in place, and we're actively looking into how we can do that with the policy engine directly within the Coinbase portal. And then on the multi-agent or the multi-network point, I think it is something that we're going to see sooner rather than later. I would disagree on that point. I think the reason we haven't seen it with apps is that it's particularly complex, but agents are able to abstract that complexity away. We haven't seen it yet, and I think that's because of the like LLMs themselves. They don't have enough context to properly interact on multiple chains without the risk of hallucination. But generally, I am optimistic that it's something we'll see sooner rather than later.
Fantastic. So we already got a conflicting opinion here on multi-chain, but the risks are still prevalent. Beavis, do you have something to say about multi-chain agents and risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lincoln and Yash are both right and wrong at the same time.
Here we go.
I think
the Nets getting spicy.
You know, the reason that we don't see multi-chain agents or multi-chain applications in general is not necessarily because they're really hard to build, but more so because users don't need them. You know, if you're interacting with a web app, chances are you're a retail user. If you're not interacting programmatically or through your custodial wallet. And so, we've been like, as a DeFi engineering firm, having, been in the trenches for half a decade now, I would always just suggest against people like, oh, I want to build the ultimate multi-chain DeFi app. And I'm like, look at Prime Protocol. They have everybody behind them. They built this crazy multi-chain liquidation system, and nobody cared, because if you're a retail user and you're operating with, a normal amount of size, one given blockchain is usually enough to satisfy all your needs. If you have so much size that you need to execute across multiple chains, then you're just not using a web app. So that's kind of what we see from the trenches is both Yash and Lincoln are right. Like, there's not really a need to focus on multiple chains because your average user, it doesn't have enough size to care. And then beyond that, it's not necessarily a complexity thing. It's more so a product market fit thing. It's like you're adding risk to the equation. You're adding a bridge. You're adding, cross-chain messaging service for what? No improvement in execution. So anytime you're adding complexity with no upside, especially without like 2x, 3x, 4x, 10x upside, you're just like, as an architect, you just say, no way. When someone asks you for that, you're like, hire someone else. But yeah, I think the sentiment is correct across the board. It's my job to agree with everyone.
Yeah, he's keeping everyone happy. Now, Ed, what about you? Do you think I might rephrase this question a little bit, actually, because of, I think, kind of the insights we've garnered so far, but feel free to chime in on the original. Do you think that the risk management would be like a barrier, like multi-chain not being available in agents would be a barrier to user adoption at this point? Because as we've kind of discussed, it seems like that's kind of the consensus. We want a lot of people using these things.
I mean, I think that it's a barrier to the extent that people tend to be pretty tribal about, where they invest and hold assets. Like, even for, I would consider myself a probably intermediate or advanced kind of crypto investor or holder. And, you can only focus on so many verticals and so many chains, right? So I think being multi-chain allows for more flexibility and a wider, probably top of funnel for audience. But I think also it gives you a lot more flexibility over the strategies that you can execute, right? Because with the bridging technologies today, as far as I know, they're pretty safe and cover a lot of ground there. So being able to like run a strategy on a different chain and then bridge that over and do it all seamlessly in terms of UX, like that's effectively like Robinhood and Coinbase, kind of what they do, right? In terms of like the areas that you're able to kind of tap into and invest in.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great point. The tribalism aspect of it is kind of big. I think there's kind of an idea that agents are going to be that final abstraction layer that everyone has always talked about for crypto, that you won't even know that you're using the blockchain anymore because you'll just be talking to an agent. And I'll let this be my final question. Do you think that is a reality, a fantasy that can be realized through DeFi AI? And just, I'll throw it back to you, Ed, and we'll work our way back around.
Sorry, what was the question?
So we've, in general in crypto, there's been this idea for a while that you'll be abstracted away from the blockchain, that users, retail, the masses, whatever you want to call them, will come in and use crypto and not even know that they're using crypto. Kind of like how I don't know anything about how the web works, but I use it every day. Do you think that DeFi AI is going to do that for DeFi? Do you think it's possible that these agents can do that?
I think it could, but it definitely, again, I think is reflective of the macro, right? Like, is there enough sustainable yield here to generate profit on these strategies for a long enough period of time? Because I think that's what people are going to look at, because they're always going to compare it against, if I put the money into the S&P and if I did this for the last 10 years or 5 years or something, like what would my return be versus the perceived risk profile of crypto, right? And especially adding all the bad press that's going on as we speak, like there is kind of that hurdle, I think, mentally and branding wise to overcome for crypto, especially when you're talking about maybe traditional retail investors. Like they probably just come around to the idea of buying an ETF, right, for Bitcoin or ETH, much less like people that are executing like degen trading strategies or restaking or blending, borrowing and perps and stuff like that. That's where, you know, being able to underwrite that and then being able to like do this in a long enough period of time is the key. And then it begs the question of if you could actually prove that you can do that, then why wouldn't you just go raise a fund and go do that yourself, right? Versus like sharing it with the world. So all some considerations. I definitely think it's possible.
Fantastic. Insightful. Thank you. Beavis, you next. Do you think that you remember the question? You want me to repeat it?
Yeah, I remember the question. Basically, I think yes. You know, I think the end game for any web-based application is that some old lady can just say into their phone, do this thing, and then it be able to do that. And I think the amount of abstraction, the layers of infrastructure we need to get there. You know, I would say Codex is really abstract at this point. And I would say we have another couple layers to go. And that could take years to build towards. So yes, it will get to that point. Will it be the way people interact with blockchain? That's yet to be seen, I would say. It's a little early to make that call. I think it will be one of the predominant ways, certainly. But yeah, we'll see.
Interesting. Thinks it's going to be one of the predominant ways. Ed, very realistic, only if the numbers can keep going. Lincoln, what do you think? Do you think that DeFi is the...
Yeah, I echo Beavis's insights and opinions there. I think it very well could be the way that we get 1 billion users, but we'll have to wait and see.
I see. Now, Yash, what about you? Do you think it is the way to get 1 billion?
Not billion, I would say, but at least like few millions users like here, because I think like billion is a far-fetched number, and like we are yet to see like billion users for crypto first. But yeah, I think like this can be a good onboarding tool as such. But I think like there's still a lot of work needs to be done, and I think like there's still like a lot of hallucination which happens. So I think like if you give it to a normal user which isn't like much very well versed with crypto, like they would also see like all this hallucination, and they would get, I think, like more scared rather than like directly using the app or website. So I'm not sure like if this is the best like if chat interface is the best way to onboard like lot of users. But I think like yeah, if someone would figure out the best form factor, and I think like yeah, then we would see like some good user base coming out of DPI.
Fantastic. I want to thank you all for your time. And that was fantastic insight, Yash. Great chat all around. We've had guys dropping off because of time commitments. Sorry for running us right up to the hour. But no, I really sincerely thank you all for your time. Ed, Yash, Christina no longer with us. Lincoln no longer with us. Rest in peace. I'm not going to say it, Henry Elder. They don't pay me to say that. I'm kidding. But yeah. Thank you again. We're going to wrap this one up, and I will chat with you all later. Let's move on to our next panel here shortly. Let me hit my transitional.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, fellas.
All right, we got an ad to play now. Engineers, script kiddies, and code monkeys have been running circles around you since 2018. Why? Because they know how to automate and capitalize on market inefficiency. They sit in their dark, dank, blue light dungeons and build bots and scripts in their telegrams to snipe, arb, and extract value from the market. Whatever happened to mass adoption? Whatever happened to democratizing finance? Instead, we've traded Wall Street for Caltech. Codex is here to change things. No more sketchy TGs. No more coding tutorials. No code at all. Tell your agent what you want it to do. Drag some sliders, check some boxes, and Codex Create will handle the rest. Build your own arbitrage bot, swing trade bot, or whatever kind of bot you can think of. Describe how it behaves without any technical expertise. Your agent will handle the rest. Hello. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun here. I got to take you guys back off. I got to do the intro first. Pardon me. Now we're moving on to the investor panel. Now, I know all of you watching are investors, so you've been champing at the bit for this panel, and for good reason, because we're going to answer the question burning on all of your lips: is DeFi investable? And to answer that question, we brought on 4 wise investors here. We have seasoned tech VC, published author, and host of the smartest podcast in crypto, Hash Rate, the indefatigable Mark Jeffrey. We're also got Mihao, a Wall Street veteran and senior VP at Arca, one of the first institutional investors in DeFi. Getting a little excited here, tripping over my words. We're also expecting to be joined by Gabriel Shapiro Esquire, aka LexNode, the crypto legend and founder of Metallics. And rounding out the panel, we have Cookies, Jingling Cookies, courtesy of Monad. Cookies is developing the Monad ecosystem and has a background in venture capital. Funny enough, Jing is also a self-described janitor. In this economy, I don't know where they find the time. But enough of my, bargain bin stand-up comedy here. Let's pull up our panelists on the stage. Hello, how are you all doing today?
Corvallis, how you doing, dude? Good to see you again. It's been a while.
It's great seeing you, Mark.
I love the tie too. Like I feel underdressed now, but well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
That's my way, I'm surrounded by all you big brain geniuses, so I gotta, wear the suit so I have some confidence to bring to the table. It's great to see you too, Mark. Mihao, we met previously. Cookies, only unknown quantity to me. I pulled the bio from Twitter. I was unsure if you were actually a janitor or not. I somehow
So yeah, actually, we got it spot on. I did come from a venture background, not a real janitor, but I covered the APAC region for Monad.
Oh, nice.
The pace we are headed at, we're all soon to be janitors for our AI overlords.
I mean, that's the hope and dream, right? Is the AI? Well, I mean, yeah, because judging by how my Roomba works, it's not looking good. It's going to take the janitor duties over. But enough palling around here. Let's move into the questions. Let's get down to the brass tacks, what the people came for. I'm going to start this one up same way we did the last one, because I think it's an important thing we got to settle on. How do you pronounce DeFi AI? DeFi. Mark, what about you? What is your go-to?
Well, dude, I was pushing for AI-Fi, but that didn't win. And I was really bummed about that because you could say AI-Fi. It's easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, DeFi is the best I can do on the other one.
I like it. I mean, it is going to take some getting used to. That's a strange note we don't hit often. Mihao, what about you?
I'll be defiant. I freaking hate DeFi. We internally try calling it AgentFi for kind of differentiation. Many different time zones. Often we don't speak, so I can't see people enunciate DeFi enough. So AgentFi for us.
Nice. I like it. Cookies, what about you? Are you also rebelling against DeFi?
No, so I've decided to go with it. When I talk to people, I just go, so we're talking about DeFi, right? DFAI. So it takes like a few seconds just to get the idea across.
Yeah. It requires a clarifying statement every time you bring it up, right? But it is kind of complicated stuff, so maybe it's very indicative of what's going on. But moving in my questions here, let's start simple. What's your AI crypto thesis? I'll start with Mihao below, and then let's circle around up to Mark.
Sure. So as some of you have kind of attended the prior panel and kind of heard a little bit more what's the exciting stuff cooking on the product side, zooming a little bit out for us as kind of a long-term investor on venture side, we're really betting on the convergence between kind of the AI camp and the crypto camp. Ultimately, see this convergence in technologies come every decade or so, or couple of decades. The last time that I can think of this has happened is kind of a social, mobile, and cloud kind of coming together in this really wonderful symphony that we got to kind of experience firsthand as users. For us, ultimately, the way we think about AI and crypto is really a little bit of the natural counterweights between one another. AI perhaps a little bit more trying to go for centralized type of command and control models, and crypto trying to ultimately decentralize this and making it a little bit more ownership centric. So what I'm looking out for, and kind of in very quick bullet point summary, we look out very much for the primitives the crypto brings that augments ultimately the AI. And those are proof identity and provenance, which I think is very basic to establish ID property and ownership rights. And second, very exciting area for us is payments and settlement layer, especially when we come to enabling this kind of next generation of AgentFi. And then kind of third, not least, but probably one that doesn't get as much traction or love from the user base, are cryptographic privacy prevention and preservation technologies that crypto brings to bear. Maybe there. We can kind of always double click, but I want to definitely hear some of the other panelists' takes.
Yeah. Cookies, do you want to take it from here? Your AI crypto thesis or your response to Michał here?
Yeah, I think largely the way I view AI crypto investment is broken down into two different sectors. So the first one is applications. I think we've seen that take off, things like AI XBT, a lot of the agents out there. So I think that's going to be a very exciting fill that we would want to look at. Thinking back in the days when DeFi, actually the OG DEFI first took off, a lot of the user-facing applications were the one that was making a lot of revenue, even wallets, taxes, and things like that. And you have seen how Big Tony, built by Codex, did very well. They return a lot of value to the users. So in terms of looking at applications, I think the two main aspects we have to look at is how much volume they can actually get, which is proportional to the number of users they have, and what mode they have. But I think the other aspect that I've been looking a lot into that I'm very keen on is infrastructure. So that includes things like agent reputation systems. How do you verify the agents are actually doing the right thing? And including like what Michał mentioned, agent to agent payments is something that's been very interesting for me as well. So yeah, that's like the overarching thesis that I have right now.
Interesting. Agent to agent payments. Now, Mark, what is your thesis and possibly even your response?
Yeah, I mean, my thesis is basically, I'll be very specific. I've been playing Tau for a little over a year now, the BitTensor universe. I'm a very, very big fan of what's going on there. They just launched Dynamic Tau. We don't know yet how that's going to work out, but so far it looks pretty good. And the other sort of side of the fence is the virtuals and the ELIZA OS side. I've not really invested too much in that because so far as I can tell, so far, those are just meme coins with mouths, right? They're just Twitter accounts that get meme coins associated with it. They're giving advice. Some of them are supposedly managing portfolios, but we don't really know whether humans are working the knobs, under the curtain. I suspect it's sort of half and half. But overall, my personal thesis is looking at all of this, sort of the cathedral versus the bazaar, where the cathedrals are the things like OpenAI and Grok and the very big, very centralized, very large companies producing monster AI that knows everything, versus a number of very small but incredibly vertical, incredibly expert agents, which are highly, highly specialized, that know about each other, that are indexing each other, and that form swarms and pay one another for services. I think that's where it's going. We don't really see examples of that yet, but that feels directionally right to me. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
So these highly specialized agents coming together, maybe engaging in agent-to-agent transactions here. That seems to be kind of a theme that's very exciting to people.
It's kind
of
vague, but but it just feels like that's directionally where it's going to end up.
Yeah, can we expound on that a little bit here? I'm open to anyone taking this that's interested in it, but what is the excitement for agent-to-agent transactions specifically? How does that pay out to like the users at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. This has been a big piece of a corner of our portfolio in the venture book of trying to kind of think how this next generation of entities transacting with one another will be able to ultimately accomplish kind of the goals that we as the end user set them on, and plenty of challenges. I mean, the today's systems of T+2 settlements and then you having to kind of go, I don't know when was the last time you guys tried to send a wire, but similarly daunting task that if you were to put an agent on the other side will be incredible. It's incredibly hard to essentially implement. So with the existing limitation of today's banking rails, oftentimes requiring KYC, AML, a variety of different kind of onboarding challenges, there are much better ways that we can kind of imagine that frontier next generation of finance take place. And that is, as Mark kind of started alluding to, when we'll get, say, an army of our agents to do kind of bidding on our behalf, whether it's part of your overall DeFi portfolio or maybe just one particular strategy, they will need their wallet, and they'll need ability to essentially go and execute and transact on your behalf. Now, that is much better done on existing crypto rails. But even today, there are many challenges, right? Scalability being one of them. There is a certain threshold at which point in time you will not be able to kind of satisfy the potential true throughput of the volume of transactions that we are expecting. But I think we are ultimately expecting that type of future. So the teams that we have backed and kind of came to us with an idea are really kind of almost two different bets. One is trying to solve for it in a context of stablecoins. So the existing kind of USD equivalent where you will be able to get each and every one of the agents doing the bidding on your behalf set up with a wallet and then ultimately go forth and execute based on the parameters. And then there is also another design space, and that is looking at other ways of settlement outside of just stablecoins, and maybe some more kind of token native ways for those agents to kind of settle in kind of that immediate kind of execution environment. And yeah, I'm super curious how other kind of panelists are thinking of the ways that each of those worlds will kind of come true. But those are extremely kind of exciting bets to us, and ones that we are trying to kind of augment our even mental model.
Right on. Mark or Cookies, do you have something you want to chime in here on this?
I'll let Cookies go, then I'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Monad, I really agree with what Nihal saying. When it comes to agent-to-agent payments, there really needs to be scalability, especially since if you think about the future world, what it looks like is that everybody would have a lot of different agents working for us in very different aspects. How do you coordinate that? There are going to have to be a lot of communication that could take place on chain, that could take place off chain. If it takes place on chain, it has to be fast enough, it has to be affordable enough. If it's off chain, how do you verify it? So there are a lot of elements that could be reliant on blockchain in general.
Yeah. So you asked, how do these things get paid? I agree with Mihal. I think it's stable coins. I think that the agents pay agents in stable coins because everybody understands, that's a unit everybody understands. So I think that's where it goes. And listening to David Sachs on the All In Pod recently describe how DeepSeek was constructed, the Chinese got around the constraints of not having really great hardware. They don't have access to NVIDIA chips, theoretically. And they basically chopped up the AI problem into vertical segments, very much like what I just described, right? So, and the way AI gets better is these vertical segments, right? If you want a better answer, you ask the AI for another refinement on the answer you just got, right? So you're sort of stacking these things up, and so there's going to be components of AI, right, in this stack of refinement, which will be excellent and better at doing certain things. So sort of like DeFi is composable, AI will be composable. The composability of AI agents probably paying one another in stable coins. There's another way in which that might go down, and that is in the BitTensor universe. I could demand my DTAO token, which is sort of the token for my subnet in that universe, as payment, which would be sort of like a utility token, sort of like Chainlink, right? You have to pay in Chainlink in order to get chain link information. So that's another way to possibly do it. But I think it's going to go stable coins mostly for most things.
Is this idea of like the thin segments of specialized focus kind of shared amongst everyone on the panel here, that we are going to be chopping up agents behaviors into as thin of segments as possible, specialized behaviors?
I mean, given all the constraints that even kind of zooming out further of what is the kind of world of constraints that these models and ultimately agents running off them are living in, right? You're looking at extremely kind of expensive chips and kind of lead time for manufacturing the latest, fastest, greatest generation. And then, of course, kind of energy, which is kind of another very important input here. And so what are, quote unquote, the proverbial shortcuts to get us to the desired effect of greater fidelity and the accuracy of those models? 100%, I would say kind of the smaller, highly specialized models working together is potential, has one of the greatest potentials. And one element that I think I would like to add to that puzzle, rather than models essentially learning from one another on these kind of highly segmented and kind of reinforcement learning paths, there is also an element of adding and plugging a human feedback into that loop, which ultimately can make these models even more accurate, to particularly if you have myself prompting on the other side, something that will recognize maybe more kind of human way to prompt versus agent to agent. In that case, I would like to actually see some of the injection of more kind of a humanoid factor into how these prompts are constructed, are executed. And then subsequently, I think we are on the lookout for teams that are trying to kind of help us with bringing kind of humanity into the fold versus leaving essentially the agent evolution to agents alone. And I think there are some very exciting projects, some that have spoken on the panel prior, but of course many others that are trying to kind of bring our inputs and make them kind of center of kind of what's coming down the pipe.
Fascinating. Anyone got a response to this? The idea of this human injection making the product more appealing or more potent? All
Yeah,
right,
I think it's gonna be very essential moving forward. Like what Mark mentioned as well. The reason why DeepSeek managed to do so well was because they use reinforcement learning, but we could take that one step further. You could inject human feedback, and it's very easy to do so when you have crypto as a coordination network, right? You could pay them very easily for just contributing to the data, for doing things like data labeling or whatsoever. So yeah, there's a lot of areas where human feedback will come in very useful, and that's going to be like a very good that's going to be a very important nuance in the future when more and more processes are getting taken over by agents and you don't really have that human element in it.
Interesting. Now, if we're talking about cutting this stuff up into as thin as segments as possible and really injecting like more human elements and kind of orchestrating these things, what would make a product like the most investable to you all at this point? Is it as focused as possible, and does that not limit its return, or is the value going to be in people coordinating multiple specific agents that are built? I guess it might be too specific. I think it phrases a yes or no, but
yeah,
it's open-ended, trust me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to succeed. I think this architecture of the bazaar, if you will, versus the cathedrals. We've seen the cathedrals succeed, right? Like ChatGPT was the fastest growing product ever in history, right? Its adoption curve was insane. But we've yet to see sort of the bizarre agentic version of this, other than the meme coins with mouths, right? Sort of take off and then fall apart. We haven't really seen success yet in the bizarre model. And I think, following the crossing the chasm strategy, it's got to be some narrow sliver, some narrow market that it succeeds wildly at, whereas the sort of cathedral versions don't do as well, right? And that will sort of pull everyone's eyes over here and be like, oh, wow. And I think there's corollaries for this throughout history, right? The PC, when the PC hit, everybody was thinking, oh, mainframes, like those little baby computers, they're nothing, they're toys. Like, who's going to want that, right? Everybody's about mainframes. And it took a lot for that sort of, for the mindset to shift and be like, oh, wow, PCs. A lot of PCs in a network are actually kind of awesome, right? And I think this is the same thing, but we don't really know why yet, right? So I think we haven't had our Lotus 123 or our word processor. I think we're still figuring out like what that is, but I think that's what's needed for this entire segment this part of the segment to explode.
Interesting. Does anyone on the panel have an idea? I know Mark just said we don't know, but any inklings on what we think that specific feature might be?
I think that there are some examples where it's not a huge stretch to imagine what it could actually do if you kind of expand the potential scope and audience. And so even just looking at I'm looking right now at kind of the cookie.found dashboard that essentially tracks vast majority of kind of the popular agents in our space. And, by top 10, number 1 here, AIXBT, which I think Mark already kind of mentioned. For those in our audience, it's a very popular agent, primarily catering towards crypto Twitter. So most of kind of the audience we are familiar with, that is scouring all of the sentiment on crypto Twitter and trying to distill analysis, pairing it ultimately with some insights. It's unique in the sense that it does have a pretty authentic voice and personality that many other of its contenders and competitors really have hard road ahead of them to compete on. But again, the sliver of a market it's covering is tiny. It's crypto. And sometimes we have to kind of pierce our little crypto bubble to realize, hey, if AIXBT, with its kind of truly head-turning ability to as Mark actually suggested, grab that attention and kind of trade in the attention economy of crypto Twitter, traders, investors, and likes, what if you actually expanded the scope of AIXBT, and what if the agent were to go outside of just purely crypto? And for example, expanded to FinTwit. We're talking really like 100x markets that all of a sudden, if you really prove your brass, you will be targeting and potentially competing with Bloomberg. Joe Weisenthal and others probably turning in their graves or ultimately really looking at ways to be replaced. And as they've always kind of cheekily point out to. But that is one of the elements where I can see the breakout category specifically for agents, where they are going after a fairly rich niche, but one that they can relate, analyze, and then ultimately also backtest. And this is one of the elements as well. Of course, the hesitation is this, just another mechanical Turk where you have, interns working around the globe all hours in order to stay up. I like to read the AIXBT logs just to kind of understand the level of interaction and kind of testing this a little bit. But again, still a lot more kind of kicking of the tires left. But there's one sliver of an example that I could see this particularly expanding beyond a really tiny segment of our market.
Interesting.
Corvallis. So I actually have a very specific idea. As you mentioned, I'm also a novelist, right? So this is my big one. This one got millions of readers. My latest one, The Name in the Shadow, not so much, but it's got 130 reviews, 4.3 stars. So basically, there's a small number of people who really love it. And there's probably a lot more of these people that I haven't reached yet. What would be great is an agent which goes out and consumes Twitter, by reading people's tweets, figures out like, oh, this person right here feels like the right kind of person who would like that book, right? My sort of small niche vertical book. And it goes and pitches them on the book. So something like a salesman bot, right? Not annoying. It's engaging. It's funny or whatever, right? Like you find a way that's not annoying. And it goes out and pitches people on the book, right? And if that person is the sort of person who likes the book, they're always looking for new things to read. So they're like, yeah. And so the agent's KPI is sales, right? And it's always working for me. It's always selling. My Willy Loman bot is always selling stuff. And I think there's a lot of these Etsy-ish, small vertical sales things. This could be a massive Shopify large opportunity for these, chatbots to go attack, right? Where it's actually chat is converting into money and sales.
Interesting. I was going to say, I do get a lot of sales bots in my DMs asking if I want 10,000 followers overnight. And they're right, I do. But they're wrong that I don't want to pay for it. But a more sophisticated bot, I think, like you're saying, capable of maybe more big data analysis, put some marketers out of business, and do that micro targeting would be very helpful. Now, for DeFi purposes, though, would this not be like a little bit concerning? It's soliciting you for investment, maybe.
Yeah, that feels off. I probably won't work for that, but yeah, it does feel like soliciting for investment. That feels bad.
Although I think Mihao has an interesting point in that if it is approaching a Bloomberg style approach, where it is surfacing insights that it finds relevant to you, could be quite useful. But again, I'm expounding. I'm supposed to be hosting, not putting my own 2 cents in here.
Yeah, I mean, you can really. This is almost like a AI layer cake, right? Where Mark was really kind of going into marketing function and sort of a kind of commerce side of things. But even going on the very top, let's call it like the icing, the UI UX, the way you interface. This is where the true kind of unlock, in my view, is going to happen. Hopefully within this year, at least it's one of my predictions, where we'll see ultimately much more personalized a way to access DeFi, because it might actually know quite well. Okay, this is contents of my wallet, what I care for, the type of assets I like. And it will ultimately try to cater towards much more kind of personalized services, while at the same time obfuscating complexity that perhaps kept me from going maybe further up my risk curve, because there was a knowledge gap there. So I think at the UI UX layer, I think there are already some unlocks in the works, and many products that we are very excited to see the daylight within this year. That I think will be pushing the envelope there.
Awesome. It's quite exciting. So Cookies, I don't mean to, it's hard to judge because I can't see you, so I can't get the body language. So I don't know if there's a particular question. Did you want to chime in on one of these or do you, or?
No, I think both Michal and Mark really summarized it really well. So yeah, I agree with them largely on that.
Cool. I think we're in agreement here that this small market or small slices of AI functionality being kind of the key thing. So if you were a crypto AI startup right now, what would you all suggest you should be doing if you're looking for funding? Is that, are we getting at confining your focus very narrowly in that way then?
Is the question is how do we get funding? Or what
the question is, if you've got an AI startup, if you got a crypto AI startup, Mark, if there are a bunch of them out there in front of you, what is going to distinguish them from you? What is going to be something that perks your ears? You're going to be like, oh, that's a little interesting.
I mean, something which is succeeding at a small scale. It's not really, you got to have working product. There's no reason not to have working product in this day and age. So you got something running, and it can be at a small scale, right? It can be I mean, honestly, what I would love right now is if somebody came up with an agent that managed my DTAO portfolio and basically figured out which DTAO subnets, what subnets to buy the DTAO tokens of, and is buying and getting out of the bad ones fast, right? As soon as it figures it out, it's bad, and reinvesting it in the good ones, because it's a highly dynamic situation, which it can mean the difference. Right now, there are very low dollar subnets which are earning a giant amount of tau emissions, and if you pick the right one, it costs very little for you to have an outsized tau return. Conversely, if you pick the wrong one, you can lose a lot of tau really fast right now, right? So if I had an agent that I trusted to basically manage my tau for me, I would love that. And it can learn and do things way faster than I can. So that's one very specific example of something I would pay for.
That's a good, strong example. What about you, Cookies? If you're seeing a bunch of crypto AI startups, what piques your interest? to distinguish one from the others for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a particular use case that I have in mind right now, but definitely it's going to be an application. I think it's an application that number one addresses a need, so it's actually tangible effect. To name a few examples, that would be like a shopping assistant, which I believe someone built using the Codex framework. And then the other things that I would look at would be moat. So what is it that's special about this particular dApp that is better than others? So if you take a look at AI XPT as compared to all the other sort of like terminals, AI XPT is good in the sense that it's already got the attention and it becomes a flywheel. People are paying attention to it. Like Mihal mentioned, he looks at the terminals as well. He looks at the logs. And I think the last thing that's really important to me is the UX. Essentially, AI to me is a kind of automation, a kind of abstraction of complexity that is going to be embedded everywhere in life. So UX is going to be very important. We've seen that play out a lot of the old school companies. The reason why they were able to get so many users was because they had a very good UX. So yeah, I would say that what the application is doing, whether they have PMF, the kind of mode they have, and the UX is very important. And eventually, it's going to get verticalized. So they're gonna start building up as an app initially, but they're just gonna keep building, and start building out their own infrastructure, and eventually they own the full stack. And I think that's what YC thinks as well. Agents or just like agentic applications are going to verticalize eventually.
Interesting. So UI UX being really key to this, and I think this is something that's coming up. It came up in the last question. I think it's going to be a big one here. But Mihal, what about you? Distinguishing AI DeFi projects, most valuable ones.
Yeah, I think for us, the litmus test is a really keen understanding of the users that the given product is being built for. Right now, primarily, one of the biggest challenges that we see in kind of DeFi or AgentFi category is that vast majority of the user base I would categorize as a prosumer, so really highly proficient, really borderline degenerate at times and kind of the outer spectrum, but very little room for kind of the novice or kind of the greenhorn coming onto a DeFi rails. So with that in mind, it is incredibly important, and this is why we love doing our kind of Friday test and prod sessions, where as a team we kind of get together, see what the latest set of tools available is out there, and or we have access to kind of the beta releases, and then really try to take them through the paces, trying to remove a lot of our own bias, and perhaps open it up to new users. So we plug in someone from our marketing or our legal, and essentially just ask them, hey, can you, I don't know, order like a bottle of whiskey using this protocol? Specific example here was Griffane that we've recently tested. And it's not easy. I think it goes without saying. In this current generation, the limitations around kind of the UI UX really give me a little bit of a pause, because particularly for some of those agents that, to kind of Mark's example, one that could potentially balance or rebalance my DTAO and subnet positioning on the BitTensor, you really ought to know extremely well the type of parameters that you'll be setting this agent with.
Yeah.
And to get to that parameter setting takes a real knowledge. It's not something that you can even Google. You can try and kind of learn, but it's an investment. And so only a certain set of user base is proficient enough to ultimately be able to set my trading parameters and understand what depth of liquidity means to like the type of execution order and the pricing that I'm trying to set for it. Without that, extremely hard. And so I see a lot of founders that are coming and pitching us really often stuck between kind of rock and a hard place. On one hand, they've built this incredibly shiny Ferraris that we can take for a spin, But when you actually take them for a spin, you realize that your user commands with the number of latches and panels, essentially comparing it to the level of prompting required, there's a very small subset of users that I think will take a full advantage of those tools. So now it becomes a challenge. Okay, how do we really obfuscate all the complexity and make it simpler? And this is where I'm very sad Gabriel wasn't able to join us on this panel, because this gets into a very murky territory of some of the legal constraints, because we have seen and talked with many of our portfolio companies about some very cool ways to abstract away some of the complexities, almost in kind of a robo-advisory fashion, where you have like a sliding scale in terms of, how much risk, how little risk, what are your retirement goals, what are kind of your family setup. And then on the back end, you let the robot essentially guide your portfolio and build your portfolio, oftentimes based on like an index. However, to do it onshore in the US, you're really getting into the point where some of these builders are now all of a sudden running assets and managing a book on the back end for their end user, which of course gets you in the crosshairs. And as many founders that we work with, they don't want to go to jail. And so hoping that with some clarity on the kind of regulatory front, with a market structure bill and a stablecoin act, we'll get there where there is like very clear rules of the road, what can be done. But we're not there yet. And so I feel for a lot of founders, and that's why we are actually in the business of finding some of these niche, unique cases where we see, there can be kind of safe experimentation had, but you also know exactly the audience that you're building for, and you're building with them based on some of that feedback loop that we like to see.
Wonderful. I think this is a excellent point. Go ahead, Mark.
Corvallis, so one thought. So something Miha actually said. So he was talking about something called Cookie. There is one other place you can go other than sort of the front end and the vertical market, and that's the back end and the infrastructure. And Cookie is inhaling all the data, the sentiment of the crypto AI market from X, and also productizing it in feeds to other AI agents. So, and everybody's using that data, and a lot of these agents are actually pulling their data from Cookie. And Cookie itself has its own agents, but also has its own coin, which is weirdly, in my view, totally undervalued. It's like around 80 million or 100 million, something like that. But this thing looks like it's the chain link of the agentic AI world, right? Like it's the thing feeding data to everything else, and everything needs it. And these guys have been doing the data crunch, the big data stuff, I think for like 10 years. So they're not sort of new to that. They've already achieved scale at data crunching. So they appear to be very unique. I don't really see much in the way of competition. I've heard of a few things, but it looks like they're the big dog right now. So I favor them.
Tremendous value there in people love to throw this expression around, but I think it's aptly used here, selling the shovels, right? Where everyone wants an agent, but the agent can't run unless it's got the fuel, and the fuel is the data. So Cookie, very interestingly, and tying to what Michał says, and which I think is important for any kind of marketing, is knowing your audience. Bringing any kind of product to market is knowing your audience. And we talked a little bit about UI, UX. Michał saying that we need to bring the UI, UX from like an F1 car to driving like a Ford Focus if you want millions of people to use it, right? But I guess the current question is with DeFi, right? There's an assumption that this should be just a retail product, but is it possible that the proper way might be just tooling for more professionals if it just makes their jobs a little bit easier? Or should the goal be to just make it the standardized UI UX layer for all of DeFi?
Good question. I feel like the promise of it is in making DeFi accessible to normies. But they don't really, it's very hard for them to imagine even what's going on, right? They're going to want to know specifics like, okay, so what's the yield? Oh, it's 20% APY. And if it's not, then I'm pissed, right? Or if it loses my money, right? Or if it makes a lot more, I'm like, I'm happy, but I'm also kind of like, how did that happen? And if I don't get a satisfactory answer, I'm a little bit wigged out by that, even though I made money, right? So, so I'm not sure how to solve that problem. I don't know. I'm not sure what the right answer is here about to your question.
Yeah. If so what do you think, Cookies? Do you think the focus is properly placed on making these tools accessible to the layman, if you will, or should the focus be more on the professionals who kind of understand the prompt, what's going on already?
I don't think it's siloed to one particular user base. You could actually do it in parallel. So many people are building within the crypto AI space that you could be creating a set of tools that's going to be used by the layman, and that's going to be inclusive of both Web3 natives who are retail, so users without a lot of funds, and it could be used by Web2 users who could be onboarded very easily through abstraction technology like Wayfinder. But in terms of institutions, I think there's a lot of things that can be done over there. If you think about a hedge fund that has to open a lot of positions, if you create a tool, if you create an agentic platform where they deploy AI agents to do things like managing lending borrowing positions, managing LP positions, which there is an app that's doing it right now, Cleopatra on Solana. That would be very useful for them, and that would actually generate a lot of revenue because the agents are going to be dealing with a much bigger volume of capital as compared to the individual retail. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of solutions are created for funds, especially if we see more traditional funds trying to tokenize either their assets or trying to put their capital on chain in general.
Interesting. Mihal, do you have a response for that? I feel like I challenged you here. I love
Absolutely. I think my dear panelists have been a little bit gun shy when it comes to where this could actually go, and what is the potential here. And one of maybe mental models that I'll bring up here that I think ties quite nicely comments made by Mark and Cookies in terms of who the potential end user in kind of this DeFi of tomorrow could be, is actually looking at another segment of the market that I would argue is probably one of the very early poster children of success of this technology, and that is stablecoins. When you actually peer under the hood at what drives the volume of transactions in stablecoins, well, to many, it is great surprise that about 70% of that volume last year, this is looking, by the way, across Ethereum, Base, and Solana, 70% of that volume has been driven by automated trading bots. And so that figure puts you in a perspective of who is really behind these automated trading bots and this velocity. Of course, the vast majority of them more sophisticated counterparties, funds like ourselves, many kind of quant shops, but also exchanges, right, that are automating a lot of their trading flows, and prime brokers. So that is quote unquote like the institutional segment that I would ascribe to. The latter kind of 30% is really spread across payments and kind of other more standard ways of deploying and using stablecoins.
What about Tether on Tron? Isn't that a very large segment? Are you including that?
It is, and it's 100% included because specifically, Tether on Tron being such a popular kind of euro-dollar equivalent rails for a lot of the trading infrastructure globally, right? So that's why it's such an outlandish proportion, and definitely kind of would probably bring that percentage even closer, like in 90%. But for that survey that I particularly quoted, with the 70% in mind, but now how that has also evolved in the time series is very important to look. When we kind of looked at the time series, quadrupled from 2023. So what that signifies to me is that there is more sophisticated counterparties that are coming on board that truly realize and see the potential in what stablecoins do as a means of exchange, and ultimately kind of the velocity of money only increases. Now, where I see and what it has done, we all know kind of stablecoins close to about 200 billion and kind of market cap at the opening of this year, really marching towards 300, probably past that. And so where I see DeFi today, right? If you kind of looked at that, I'm looking at kind of DeFi Llama, total volume locked, let's call it around $100 billion across all the kind of major protocols. For me, what DeFi can increase is particularly the velocity and expansion of these protocols, because just what the automated trading bots did for stablecoins, kind of greater utilization, greater capital efficiency, I can see almost equivalence in agents doing your bidding on your behalf, participating in these protocols while you're asleep, while you're out of your family, and doing and essentially rising the kind of the size of these pools of capital proportionally to kind of the level of that kind of growing GDP. And so with that in mind, we are only seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg and kind of that V0, let's call it, of DeFi today. But with some of these unlocks that we kind of talk here around UI UX, about kind of the greater automation, capital efficiency, some risk management and security protection, I ultimately see it expanding the pie and really growing the pie. That is for both the institutions that are taking advantage of this technology and kind of automating their backends, but also greater retail participation and kind of that educational journey that for many of us on this panel has taken years in the making, many rug pulls and kind of many assets lost in the process, and we're still here undeterred. Well, that is going to be a much higher bar for kind of that net new user, but I ultimately don't see DeFi growing without kind of the net new user. I wanted to kind of break out of this kind of recursive capital curse. And so this is why I look to things like AI injected into these protocols as a chance for ultimately bringing fresh capital.
Very interesting. That's an excellent point. The velocity of money flying around through DeFi protocols would be massive if these agents are doing it as we sleep, without me having to check Twitter every 30 seconds. Now, I kind of want to talk a little bit more because we're kind of getting to the end here. I want to end on something a little more emotive, something that we all can kind of relate to here. Over the last, I guess a month or so now, DeFi AI has been put through the ringer, asset price wise, right? We've seen a massive market pullback into, I don't know, I shouldn't be editorializing too much, but into garbage, and then people get burned, and now it's all gone. Do we think? I want to get the panel's opinion on the current state of investability of DeFi AI, and is this deflating in any way, or is this a good thing? I'll start with I'm gonna start with Cookies first, and then let's go.
Yep, I think definitely we've seen a huge drawdown in terms of the performance. We're seeing like 80%, 90% drawdowns on the prices. But I think there are gems hiding within this dark cave. A lot of the projects, the DeFi projects, are actually pushing out a lot of developments. There's a lot of new features that's coming out. Graphene, if you take a look, they have something new every single week, I think, almost, and it's getting more and more innovative. They started off with very DeFi focused items, but now they're expanding into things like shopping, coffee bins, and stuff like that. So I think there are some winners within this space that's on the application side, and like what Mark mentioned earlier on about Cookie, I'm NFA, but I personally hold it as well. I think it's going to be a great asset going into the next wave. It's going to be used by a lot of AI agents. It's going to be a essential infrastructure that agents are going to be using. So I think it's going to bounce up. I'm still overall very positive on AI agents or DeFi space. But yeah, I guess it really depends on whether people are using the product and whether they deem the value of it sufficient for them to actually use it.
Mark, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, very specifically, I'm big into Tau, as I said. Barry Silbert is now running Yuma, which is he's basically his full-time job now is investing in BitTensor and Tau subnets. So I agree with them. I believe that is specifically very investable. I think Cookie is specifically very investable. The other stuff, the AI 16Z, the AI XBT, the virtuals, the Eliza OS, the meme coins with mouths, Not so much. I think most of that is it was interesting, but it's not investable, and it kind of came and went. And I'm a big user. I'm actually a user of Codex. I actually run a little chat bot, or it's just a chat bot of my own, but I have played around with it. I really like what those guys have done. So I'm a fan. And I do think that the next wave of these things will be more investable, but I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And I'm still got my eyes open and looking at everything as fast as I can.
Interesting. Awesome. Mihal.
Well, price pullbacks and kind of corrections is what makes this job really so exciting, right? Like picking ultimately some of the more exciting segments that we get conviction on and can get conviction on. And for us, that boils down to, quite simply, what are some of the early use cases that we could relate to or actually use in our kind of day-to-day. And so there have been very few. And admittedly, even this kind of first wave of agents that have come, the frameworks that Mark has named, they really solely rely, or at least are very heavily indexed on kind of the make or break of these agents, right? When you kind of look at the wave of launches of agents leveraging either virtuals or ELIZA, very few kind of are still there, right? Or still kind of in a relevant or in that kind of attention economy. And in many ways, I think the price action in this segment has really, in many investors' eyes, been just an extension of kind of the meme coins, what at least many investors have seen in meme coins. And I would say it's a very easy kind of dots to connect. But I would say if you're not kind of in the day-to-day of development, talking to the teams that are working on shipping kind of the new features, and ultimately being able to kind of experiment and play with them, is extremely hard to kind of invest and kind of navigate. Specifically, very hard to do it as a fund, because to invest in size into any of those, liquidity is very tight. And so ultimately, you are moving the price against kind of your own interest as you're sizing into some of them. But where we find, so we don't think of them, I guess, as the trades. Is kind of an important element to add. We are thinking of many of those positions that we kind of like in this landscape as kind of a longer term plays. Ultimately, the pieces on the boards that will be expanding that kind of GDP of this vertical. And certainly one of the safer ways to play it historically has been some of the tooling, kind of the projects that both Mark and Cookies mentioned, team that I know very well and knew for many years from kind of their days of actually building a much smarter CRM systems back in 21, all on chain. But now with the kind of latest pivots to AI, it's wonderful to see actually a lot of that hard work that went into the infrastructure build out start paying dividends. And unfortunately, we're not seeing a ton of the infrastructure and kind of heavy rigging build out with many of the existing projects out there with a token. And that is, point in time in the market. If you kind of analyze historically some of these waves that came and went, the dust ultimately settles, and you see who's been kind of doing the real work versus someone that has been kind of jockeying the retail buyers. So try to ultimately find kind of the good horses and good jockeys we can bet.
Right on. I think the expression is when the tide goes out, you can see who's wearing pants, right? Is kind of the idea here. So it's not, the bell's not quite rung on DeFi AI quite yet. And it sounds kind of promising. It sounds like our notable investors here are still quite excited for the sector. I'm trying to think, I don't have much time here, but I want to express my gratitude to you all for showing up here and participating in this conversation with me. I hope it was as informative and entertaining as it was for me, and I'm sure our audience at home. Thank you, Mark, Cookies, Mihal. Thank you guys so much. And let's take a quick break before the next and final panel for the show for the day, infrastructure. So be sure to stick around for that. We're going to talk about where DeFi is going.
Thank you, guys. And if anyone in the audience is building at the AI and crypto crossroads, don't be shy to DM. We are kind of at Arca and myself here, super keen to chat. So
I am a fan of Arca, by the way. I read all your stuff. So yeah, big fan. And I watch your pods and all that stuff. So you guys do great work.
Much appreciated, sir.
Awesome.
And I'm in need of some good sci-fi novels, Mark. So
made a sale. The sales bot working. There we go.
Yeah, be sure to pick up your copy of Name in the Shadow. I still got to get my signature on mine, Mark. So I'm coming to LA.
We'll take care of you. We'll take care of you. Not to worry.
All right. Well, until next, in 3 or 4 minutes, I'll see you all again. Adios. All right. Let's throw this up. Oh, wrong one. This one. I'm sorry. And if you're watching at home, be sure to join the Discord for our after party after the event. It'll be a fun time. We're going to be discussing some more DeFi AI stuff. It'll be in the Codex Discord, so it'll be Codex centered. But until then, let me play a little bit of our DeFi anthem. Next one. Okay. Hello and welcome back. Sorry, I had to take a little water break. Throat was getting parched. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We've only got one last panel for the day, and this is going to be the most forward-looking of them all, and also going to be a little bit more intricate, I believe. The infrastructure panel, where we're going to seek consensus on what's next for DeFi AI. So we're going to bring our techiest minds out here for this one. We'll be joined by, as you saw on the wait, Munchies, the lead AI architect for Codex, SafetyBot of the fast and based Rise chain, Nick Emmons, the CEO of Allura Labs, which I know you know, David Menarche, CEO and co-founder of Valerie, developing multi-agent systems and distributed ledger tech, and Odil Time, a core maintainer of Eliza OS. And we do have our super secret special guest back again. But let's get this started here. Let me add everyone to the stage. Oh, yeah, we got some hot mics now. I'm hearing it. This one. Hello, hello. Look at us. We're stacked to the gills with freaking geniuses here. Thank you all so much for joining me. How's everyone doing? You know how this makes me feel. Most of these guys are anonymous. That makes me feel like I'm in good hands right now. I'm in really good hands when it comes to
This is going to be a good technical panel. For
you know
sure.
what I mean? We got a Milady eyes and everything. Now let me kick this one off with my typical. Thank you, Nick.
I feel like I have to turn it off now.
No, man, no. You had a beautiful mug, dude. Don't run away. Don't let these peer pressure you. I'm gonna kick this off with my icebreaker from the last couple here. The last one was kind of a revolt. No one wanted to pronounce DeFi AI, so I'll ask you this: AI-Fi, DeFi DFAI, or something else? How do you like to term this new industry or this new vertical? I'll kick it over to Munchies and we'll go clockwise.
Hey guys. Yeah, I mean, great question. Very technical. I think, I mean, personally, I like AI-Fi, but I'm not too picky. I'm not exactly a marketing guy, but
that's right. Know your lane, buddy. Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll go with AI-Fi. I think that one just sits good with me.
Very good. Very good. David.
Yeah, same. I think you should be able to pronounce it and people know what you're pronouncing. So there we go.
Some harsh criteria. Odie.
Yeah, it's largely probably decided by people that just read a lot of text on the internet and not really paying much attention to that. We're gonna actually have to talk about this at some point, but here we are.
Yeah. It sounds like it was made by an AI who doesn't talk, you know. Nick Emmons.
Same page. AI-Fi. It's not perfect, but it's way better than DeFi. You know, I don't. It's annoying. You know.
Look, guys, this is the DEFAI Summit, and I think we're in open revolt here. We got to call up the marketing guy that did all the graphics. We got to switch all this over for the video. Safety bot, what do you think?
I go DeFi X AI just because I'm a DeFi purist, so I'm going to keep the DeFi term in there. So.
Doesn't want his DeFi muddied with AI. I get it. Right on. Now, Beavis is going to be here to help me co-host this because I'm getting a little tired. I'm running out of energy. But let's start off with, and Beavis also wrote a lot of these questions, so if they're dumb, they're on him, not me. First one, what's your favorite AI model? Safety bot, you go up.
I really like the ResNets, the image models, just because that's how I started with AI. You could do like some super cool stuff, like built like a pretty cool like satellite model that would basically like identify households and be used at an old solar company I worked at. So that's brings back nostalgia. And then in terms of the modern models, I really like the solar uncensored model, just because you can get some degenerate responses from that if you wanna do some NSFW roleplay, etc.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting real technical. I like it. Munchies, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a boring answer, but just whichever one helps me execute my life and tasks faster. It's pretty simple. You know, I really like Claude when it first came out, and some of the more recent reasoning models are pretty cool. You know, DeepSeek. But I mainly just use the models kind of integrated into my IDE as like a pair programmer. You know, at the moment using Claude a lot. I like their responses. So
interesting. Isn't that a niche Copilot was filling primarily, but Claude does quite well?
Yeah, Copilot was really good, but I feel like it's been surpassed by some of the more recent models, personally.
Interesting. Nick, what about you? Favorite AI model?
I'm in a similar boat. I jump between a bunch depending on what I'm doing or kind of like what I'm trying to supplement. I've been playing around with R1 a lot though. Just trying to get it to say stuff it was meant not to say. It's been a fun time. So yeah, R1 is what I've been playing with the most recently.
Awesome. Odie, what about you?
Yeah,
generally been using GPT and more so Anthropic these days. When I was playing with CPU inference, I did like this model called Supernova. It was kind of light on the CPU and did quite well, so I can throw that out there.
I'm liking we're getting some nice diversity in the answers here. A lot of things I've never even heard of. David Menarche.
Yeah, I mean, nothing much more interesting than what we already heard. I think the Claude one sonnet is pretty good from that side, and then reasoning, yeah, R1, and I mean, I do use vanilla ChatGPT with the reasoning models O1 and O3 Mini, so haven't really used them in agents as much as the other models.
Interesting. And Beavis, what about you?
Well, I'm a little bit of a simpleton. I generally just use ChatGPT 4.0 for basically everything.
Okay, right on. See, I only use Codex branded AI models, dude. Wait, never mind. Forget it. Moving on. Now let's get into the actual core of the discussion here. With your understanding of AI at its current level, would you trust an AI agent to manage your finances at this point in time? And if not, what do you think the missing piece is to make that something you would allow it to do? Let's go the other way back around this time now. So, but I'm skipping Beavis, going to David.
Great question. So we've been building agents for a while, and specifically I myself over 6 years, and you didn't have large language models at the time that were generally useful, and so to this day we're mostly building like hybrid architectures with rules and learning based, where I think that's the way to build DeFi agents. I mean, I haven't actually, or AIFi agents, I guess, haven't actually seen all too great examples when it's sort of fully model based. You do need some guardrails, and so if you tell me how you architected that AI agent that's dealing with my finances, then I can tell you the answer. But I think it needs a good set of rules on top of any sort of open-ended model based decision making and path selection, because otherwise they're not robust enough at this point in time.
Not robust enough at this point in time. Odie, would you let an AI agent handle your finances at this point? And if not, why not?
Well, some hands my finances are kind of simple, but on other hands, like I've given it my tax questions before. Probably shouldn't have, but you do kind of reach out, and I think one of the main use cases is going to be education. If it can help hold my hand and understand things I don't understand, and build that trust that, okay, maybe this model does know what it's talking about, and I can confirm that, then I have more confidence to move forward with that system.
Interesting. That's a good idea. More as kind of like I feel like this has a negative connotation, but as like a crutch, as like a thing to kind of help you along, as opposed to, the whole car. Nick, what about you? Would you let an AI agent manage your finances?
Yeah, I think I have like a slightly different risk profile than the average user of crypto, though. I think I agree with the guardrails point. I think LLMs, generative models on their own, should be supplemented with kind of more rule-based systems or more classical models to create a more robust or understandable strategy set. But I also think part of the interesting aspect of AI agents is the ability to spawn some large n number of non-deterministic actors in a market environment, and in doing so allow entropy to sort of be maximized and kind of, I don't know, I think it's interesting to see the kind of emergent intelligence or emergent behavior that comes from that. So I trust them with my finances more so in a conceptual interest in seeing what maximum entropy in market environments produces. But I do think guardrails and sort of hybrid AI systems are a way to make them viable and fairly risk mitigated in kind of today's set of tools and infrastructure.
That's quite wild, Nick. You've kind of portrayed yourself as a mad scientist. I just want to see what happens almost.
I think chaos is good, chaos is great.
Wow, I love to hear it. Munchies, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I am so good at losing money in crypto that the agent could not possibly do worse. So, I'm more than happy to work with the agents and get them managing my portfolio. I think it's definitely important that they have a lot of guardrails and they kind of need to be handheld a little bit. My experience with it's been very much like dealing with like a 3-year-old sometimes. But with the right guardrails, I think they can make some good decisions. And from what I've seen, when they plan out, kind of the risk aspects of my portfolio, it's definitely more comprehensive than my own risk management. So.
Interesting. So kind of additionally, kind of like what Odie was saying is like a supplemental tool as opposed to necessarily the primary actor, but also you're saying it's fine as a primary actor because
I'm okay to let it have a crack, but yeah, definitely working with it. And then of course, building out those guardrails and sufficient tooling for them to kind of reliably execute on an idea.
Interesting. Now, Safety Bot, I'll kick it over to you. Would you let an AI agent manage your finances?
I'd probably say no, unless there was just like heavy guardrails. So, in terms of like DeFi, the max I'd kind of be willing to do is there's basically like some form of like whitelisted places where it can allocate funds, and maybe the AI can just like switch and like rebalance across that. I just see without those guardrails, just like huge tail risks. Like I think back to like the long-term capital management days where they like blew up. They kind of thought they had this, formula that was like solving the market, and just billions of dollars were wiped. And I guess the other big problem I see is LMs and AIs are like great at predicting things in like a static environment, but markets are dynamic. So that potentially like doesn't like work that well if we're talking about like how LMs like translate to a dynamic environment, because they're going to be trained on historical data. And then the other thing that I think of is just like markets are adversarial. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the guy. There was this English guy called Navinder Singh, and he went to jail, but he was basically doing this thing where he was like spoofing orders, and he was like screwing over these HFT traders because he like figured out the algorithm. And there's like if kind of like AI agents get to the point where they do get mass adoption in like finance, people are going to like figure out ways to like manipulate them, in my opinion, and figure out like, okay, what patterns are they using to like make decisions, and they can just basically like fuck you over, which yeah.
I think this is I think that's an important point, Safety Bot, because a consensus around the table has been guardrails, but my camera died. But what kind of guardrails are we talking about? Because there's like what, two kinds of risks: the risk that you can anticipate and the risk that you can't. So in the instance of the trader that you were talking about, these high frequency traders are really smart guys, but they weren't planning on someone figuring out their algorithm. What kind of guardrails can we install for? Is it feasible to have an agent manage your finances? Are there enough guardrails that we can put on to kind of prevent that kind of manipulation? This is just kind of open for whoever.
Happy to take a step here. I mean, there's, I think we should factor apart like some of the risks involved here. I mean, let's say you have a trading decision, right? And then the agent or you as a human has come to it, and then there's the risk involved in taking that position from a kind of financial risk management point of view. But even not like getting there, right? If you think about an autonomous AI agent, there's other risk factors you're introducing. Okay, so there's like software managing a wallet. Is this doing what it's intended to do, or is it hallucinating something along this path? Can it sort of arbitrarily send the funds into the wrong place because it maybe just hallucinated, one part of the address wrong, or entire strategies. Then there's the wallet management aspect of it. So I think like when you're building an autonomous AI agent that manages your portfolio, it's not just portfolio risk management, it's like all the other technological risks you're layering on top, right? And so then it really makes a real difference, like how is this thing deployed, how is it architected? And so we need to, I think, pick these points apart. So, wallet management, like one thing you can do is you can do account abstraction, okay? And then you could, for instance, bring in means where the off-chain agent parts, maybe have only a restricted action space on-chain, where, for instance, you constrain it on a smart contract level so that the agent can, for instance, only engage with whitelisted portfolios to begin with, protocols to begin with. Let's say, you only wanted to engage with a set of lending protocols, a set of other DeFi protocols, and then you at least know, okay, this agent can at least only do this and not randomly start, engaging with this other thing which might be popping up. And then, like, how is the system deployed, right? Like, who controls the keys? Is it, you, the user, using the agent, or is it a fully trustless setup in some sort of secure enclave where, there's all sorts of access permissioning, or is it literally you trust some dev somewhere running some code? I think there's all these layers of like risks you're adding on top before we even start talking about like the, financial side of it and the portfolio management side of it.
Yeah. I think, like, in my opinion, there's already like the perfect stuff already like built for this. Like Beavis and Munchies would be like super familiar with like the Yearn architecture. In my opinion, that like translates super well to like having guardrails, because then you can have set like different permissions for what the agent can do. Like exactly what the agent can deploy to, because like those strategies are whitelisted. So then it's just like a case of it like basically like moving funds around between things you already know that's safe. But that also means that you're like severely like capping what the agent can do, because then if there's like some new opportunity that comes up, it can't really take that. Like it can't protect. But I mean, you could have it say like, okay, set some rules like I'm only going to be able to trade on like certain router addresses and certain like rules for what the market cap can be as well. Like there's a lot you can do on chain as well, I think, to like set those rules and set those guardrails. Would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll jump in here a little bit. One of the reasons we started working with AI is just because developing vaults and strategies, it's like 100K a pop to get it fully produced and audited. 50 to 100K for a Yearn strategy, sometimes much more for really complex ones. And obviously that doesn't scale very well. And even if your competition is, for example, the algo trader who maybe has perfected this system just in kind of like a one-to-one scenario, I think really where we need to look is kind of in between. How can we create these really dynamic strategies that are really flexible, and where is the smartest place to put these risk controls? Do we put them at the API level? Do we put them at the smart contract level? Some blend of the two. Do we want to railroad them into one specific or a set of very specific actions via smart contracts or yield vaults like Yearn? That I think is a question that we're working really hard on answering, as I think a lot of people here on stage are. And I just don't think that we're going to find product market fit for a lot of these aggregated yield products that you could think of the best strategy ever. The time you build it, the yield is gone. I think we need to get that Web 2 speed. We need to be able to secure these things at the Web 2 level, maybe pass in some assertions, when you execute the transaction, or maybe have a series of lightweight libraries that can be composed into the strategies by an agent. And I think we're not really going to know what the best course of action is until we do one of them or a series of them and just hammer them and see what works and what doesn't. Because these models, like if are infinite, it's like it's hard to know what they're going to do really well with until you see it in production and test.
But I guess with like the the way I see it is, if you take like the Yearn approach, you essentially, like the way I see it is, everyone would have their own Yearn vault, and you like actually don't need to do all the heavy stuff like the accounting logic. It's more just a case of, okay, you just have like a list of permissions of, what can the agent actually do with like these different strategies. So you kind of, the way I envision it is like you take the good parts of Yearn and you take away like the heavy upfront development, and you just say like, okay, these are the permissions, this is what the agent can do, this is what protocols it can interact with,
Yeah.
etc.
I mean, even training it to borrow from Yearn and borrow from like traditional algo trading, libraries, principles, etc., to whip these things out on the fly, I feel like would be maybe like we're asking for trouble, but that is something that I've imagined. It just I feel like it's maybe a too complex path to go down, but I am here to be the color commentator, so I'm going to step out and let everybody else speak on it.
Yeah, I just want to throw in something behind the two of you, because I think it also really changes, right, the risk and regulatory profile of the product. Like if you're pulling user assets versus like, which the Yearn model, and then you have strategists sort of deploy those versus the user owns a piece of software, which might be open source, MIT, whatever. They download it, and it's basically their wallet. It's just a smart wallet, and that has like very different implications, right? In the one case, you're running a DeFi protocol, and the other one, you're a software developer of a code base, and potentially it stops there. It's an interesting like dichotomy, and like also implies like interesting different like responsibility you're putting on the user, right? In the one case, the user sort of has a certain brand where maybe they believe in that the strategists do this well. In the other, they have an agent which might give their own instructions. So we have this in OLAS called currently on Modius. The user kind of increasingly can configure it to their needs, and so the user is sort of in control of that strategy, that portfolio strategy, and then they're also, if the strategy doesn't perform, that's also sort of their responsibility, right? Again, like very different implications for like adoption and like the user journey, the UX, everything.
Yeah, very important stuff, because as Dave said, this kind of dictates the final result of the product, is kind of how we address these issues as they come up. A recurring kind of theme, or at least it came up in the product discussion, was the data connections, the current struggle, the current blocker as identified in the product panel. I'm stretching this out because I've got to collect my thoughts, is that the data APIs, like the ways that these agents can pull in information, is kind of limited at the moment, and that limits their appeal as products. Is this a massive blocker right now for building out the infrastructure of these DeFi AI products? Or is it subject to these security concerns, or is it solved already? Curious to hear what you panelists think about this.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. So I think there's like a bunch of gaps here. So one thing that I think is just a huge gap is like better training data, like specifically for like DeFi and crypto. Like if I talk to some of the like main LLMs and ask them like more niche questions, I think they're like, the responses are like pretty trash. And I think ideally like making that open source is like the way to go, because it like is becoming like super cheap to like fine tune your own models, and like basically like if you look like different parts of the internet, for example, there's like big community doing like waifu stuff. They've like done crazy stuff with LLMs, and that's all been done out in the open. So I think that's like one other big thing. And then I think, yeah, just like right now the tooling infra is like pretty trash for like getting like on-chain data. And I mean that's just like a general problem, but ideally like getting better like tools that we can like plug in the data to the LLMs is like the big gap as well.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think data has been a consistent issue in my experience. You know, you're always going to be limited by the quality of the data coming in. You know, no matter how smart the model is, and particularly now when the models they're not, you know, they're not genius level. They can be inconsistent. You're relying on pre-processing a lot of data and spoon feeding them just to kind of get them to make some kind of simpler decisions. So yeah, I think right now data accessibility and cost is very much a blocker.
Data accessibility and costs. Now, Odie, Nick Emmons, we haven't heard much from you lately. I'll broaden the question here. What do you think is like the biggest blocker right now for financial AI products at the moment?
I think data plays a role, probably. I think there is inclination, which is probably a function of like the general attention, like in a kind of higher level sense, being on sort of like the more nascent categories of generative AI that I think has maybe distracted some of the kind of or kind of pulled attention away from what could potentially be more productive and practical paths towards bringing AI closer to finance today. I think like classical AI and like different types of more mature classes of AI, I think have been used in financial contexts for decades at this point, and are likely being underexplored as a means of more practically bringing AI into the DeFi ecosystem today, because a lot of the attention, a lot of the discourse is so anchored around the more exciting and more nascent, less mature generative categories of AI. So I think it's an attention thing as well. I think there is a environment, or there is a kind of paradigm that emerges when you have such a hyper financialized environment that is crypto, that the experimentation cycle becomes accelerated because markets are useful environments for accelerated experimentation. And I think we're just kind of working through that now. And so yeah, I don't think it's a bunch of really tangible things. I think it's just working through the natural experimentation cycle that we're going through right now. I think there are many instances of AI being successfully integrated into DeFi today, just waiting to break into the broader discourse.
Right on. Odie, what about you? Do you agree or disagree?
I would say that the biggest blocker is education. I think open source is definitely the path forward, and we need as many people experimenting with things as possible, because these LLMs are like black boxes and capable of stuff we're not even aware of yet. So with the market being so mercurial and changing on a daily basis, I think the data is always going to lag. So it's going to about how can you create systems that can react to the market changes quickly, because that's what LLMs can kind of really do, right? It's, you don't have to wait for a human to make a decision. We've had high frequency trade systems before, but how fast can it adapt to the market, and how can it respond, and how can you explain that to the devs that are trying maybe new to finance? And I think we've seen a lot of people that maybe have been a programmer before want to learn how to spin up financial agents and start experimenting. And I think that's just trying to get them up to speed is going to be a challenge.
Interesting. I think that's an interesting point, and it kind of dovetails nicely with another idea that has been brought up before, which is we're in the experimentation stage, as Nick Emmons was kind of describing, the chaotic stage. And so we need lots and lots and lots of agents to kind of test the waters, right? To see what works, what doesn't work. With this in mind, do you panelists believe that the space is moving forward rapidly or kind of slowly at the moment? With the recent market pullback, because there's less eyes on DeFi AI, is it disheartening at the moment, or is the promise still there?
I mean, I would say the promise is absolutely there for autonomous AI agents, because we can see that it's sort of also independently there of crypto, right? And like crypto has a number of enabling features that can scale it in interesting ways, bring more attention to it, and so on. I think crypto always does two things. Like it does attract the capital, and some of it goes into sensible things, and it also, a lot of it obviously goes into maybe in hindsight senseless speculation. And I feel like as a result of it borrowing from the future by design, we always have a lot of attention about things when they're still in their infancy. Certainly, I would say a lot of the agentic stuff isn't as agentic as maybe what people are made to believe. But I'm very much subscribing to the idea that there's a there. So one thing was already mentioned around the sort of funding potential. The other one is around like coordinating agents, and then generally giving agent wallets. It's just hard to see how that happens without like some inherent like crypto rails. And I mean, it's happening with inherent crypto rails already, right? But I would point back at this data piece. I mean, as an industry, we're still terrible compared to like more general AI at the data piece, right? Like even if you want your DeFi or AI-fi agent do anything, like everyone's sort of more or less starting from scratch, and even like the better, I guess, like data plays in crypto are minuscule relative to what they probably should be. And if you really want to build like fantastic autonomous AI agents that broad groups of people can have access to, then we need much more index data, like the amount of easily accessible, I guess, like DeFi data across like various slivers, not just like current block height, but like indexed across wide ranges. Like everything's custom, right? Like when we're building something, we always basically starting from scratch, like indexing a bit here, a bit there. It's not like there's some sort of good way of accessing like a lot of data at once, I would say. And then, if you think about that's just looking at the current state, right? Like in the actual definition of like state of a blockchain, or like it's sort of time series, or it's sort of relational database view in a sense. But if you then think about, okay, how do I turn that data into, let's say, better model? I mean, again, all of this doesn't, like, crypto might use these models, but there isn't like a crypto native way currently to say, okay, here a DAO or like a group of people or agents is creating valuable data, and then that is landing back in a better model. Like in my mind, what we should have is this really closed loop where all these amazing crypto applications generate a shit ton of data that travels back into like some shared training runs, and we get better like MIT licensed, Apache 2.0 licensed like models that we then can all use again to feed into even better applications, right? But in theory, crypto is perfect for that. We have the incentives, we have a lot of the sort of in principle infrastructure for that, but in practice, like all the centralized players are like light years ahead still when it comes to all this sort of stuff.
It sounds like a coordination issue primarily, right? Which I think is it briefly came up before, but this kind of contradiction between marrying DeFi and AI, where you have something decentralized versus kind of centralized AI models. But before I go off track, Nick, you were going to say something.
I kind of forget what I was going to say, to be honest.
It's okay, no worries.
Yeah. No, I think it was basically on the lines along the lines of what David was just saying as well. I think like crypto moves in cycles. Cycles are a function. They're a feature rather of markets. I think like we tend to overestimate things in the short term and underestimate them in the long term. And I think that's been sort of represented by like the various sectors within this industry, within any industry, frankly. And I think we're just kind of moving through the initial stages of that. I think we've explored agents as a concept. We've built robust capital formation paradigms or dynamics around agents, and I think the next step is now taking that capital that's been formed at scale around these different agent projects, around the broader crypto AI category, and seeing that be deployed effectively and returning, I guess, like more substantive infrastructure, agent strategies, things like that. So I echo what was said.
Awesome. Beavis, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. So I figured I'd pull one out of the audience from Henry Elder. Shout out. He's interested in people's thoughts on TEEs, which are, I believe, trusted execution environments,
Unless he's talking
and how they
golf.
might apply to AI. Does anyone have any strong opinions on where they fit in the AI stack, and if they fit in the AI stack?
Yeah, I think things like ZK and TE are like pretty interesting because if you like at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to run inference on a blockchain. Like that's just delete it, right? So it's always going to have to be like done off chain if you're using large models, unless you want like a basic linear regression model. So some way to like prove that the inference is not malicious, it's actually like use the correct model, etc. I think is like pretty important. There's also been like some other approaches. I think I saw something like Eigenlayer built something where you could do like a restaking and you could get slashed if you did like a malicious inference. So yeah, I think like ways we can actually like make sure that especially if these like AIs are being used to make financial decisions, you want to make sure like the output's trusted, because potentially, let's say I'm selling an AI agent tool to manage your finances, I could potentially just rug you and like tell the agent to okay, like sell all your assets to buy my random shitcoin that I just launched. So yeah, I think it is like super important that we do have like some way to like verify the inference is not malicious.
Any other thoughts on TEEs? I think that's an important security aspect. I like the focus on a security safety bot. This is some horrifying things that we're hearing about as being technically possible with these DeFi agents.
That's why they call me the safety bot. I'm all about safety.
I love it, dude. We got to give you a safety hat for your avatar.
David, did you have something?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I would say like, tell me the use case and I tell you the tools, right? Like it's a tool, and then like it depends on the use case whether it's the right one to apply. And like earlier, late last year, right, there was a lot of debate on crypto Twitter around like, okay, are these agents we're seeing like is it people LARPing or is it like actually like software under the hood, right? Like are these software processes or like AI models that are running, making these tweets or other kind of decisions? And in the absence of having like some non-existent but sort of imaginative like ZK system that can sort of run large language models where you can sort of prove that in that way you can move your agent into a TE and then sort of create assurances for your audience that it behaves in a certain way, and like that's valuable in some cases. Maybe also from a regulatory point of view, you're creating a different type of mitigation if you do that, rather than saying, oh, trust me, I've got it running on my server, right? And then if something goes wrong, it's obviously a different story. If you've got it running on your server and something goes wrong, maybe it actually went wrong and you were just unlucky. In the other case, you can sort of verifiably prove that maybe it was just software that went crazy, and not some developer. So I think like really depends on the use case, but there's also a lot of use cases where it makes no sense. I mean, if you think about like, for instance, like the model we often have is MetaMask, it's a wallet you have on your browser, everyone has it, or you have like a competitor product as a piece of local software, and then like in there is your key. Well, that can evolve into an agent, right? And so now that will run in your browser, and there's tons of use cases where that's just fine, right? Like you basically have a local piece of software doing stuff for you. So yeah, I think it's very use case dependent.
Interesting. It sounds like,
and I'll maybe.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll maybe speak on behalf of one of our engineers who really likes TEEs for anything that is touching keys. So there's the what is it? The Confidential Computing Consortium, which is developing a lot of OSS for HSM and TEEs and things like that. And we're really excited about migrating our Kubernetes clusters to like TEEs so that we can lock down any private keys or anything like that even further. Because we're using HSM right now to store keys, and the way users interact with them is really kind of railroaded, and really our goal, and T's could play a big part in this, is migrating a lot of infrastructure over there. We haven't thought about it too hard for like running the actual inference or anything like that. But I've talked to a lot of teams in crypto who are proposing that as being a really powerful use case. So we're considering them up and down the stack. I think cost-wise, it needs to be proven out. And then also like anything beyond like key storage or whatever, do users care is a question that needs to be answered. And I think right now it's not.
Interesting. Any final thoughts on TEEs before we move on? All right.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of also point on Justin's point just now. Like I think, GPU networks, there's lots of them. P networks, there's now a few. They're like sort of easier commoditized. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that these, it's not easy to run these things, but it's sort of the more obvious thing, right? You take an off-the-shelf piece of hardware, you build a crypto network on top, you go to market. And then that's literally what we see, right? And like, but ultimately you've got to have a user. And I think that's where a lot of this comes down to, right? It's like, what are these use cases that find real like end user adoption with agents in crypto? And like, we've seen like some inkling of that last year and this year, but like, if you're really honest with each other, then like at scale, right? Like this looks totally different. Like at scale, every human has 1 to n such agents. And like, we're talking about billions, trillions of these agents. And then the question is, will they majority of them run in TEs or like some other kind of architecture? I think that's really open-ended.
I think this is a really nice way that you cracked it open there, David, because my next question is, if do we believe that in the near future, far future, that's another part of this question, the timescale, but that human economies could be replaced by AI-driven economies in the future, judging by your experiences working in AI-Fi at the moment. While we say it's in the nascent stages, it's maybe fairly primitive right now. Is it a future that you could see coming to fruition, fully AI-powered economies? I'll drop this one on Odie. Odie, what do you think about that?
Well, I don't think they're going to have their own economy. I think, it's just a one big market. They're going to help us assist humans in the market, and they might transact themselves. I think my big boss man Shaw has talked several times that to get humans to trust AIs, we need to have them speak English and do transactions out in the open, and not have their own kind of digital machine language they talk to each other. So I think the more we show it out in the open and be very easy for humans to understand as well as humans to interact with, that's going to be the secret sauce. Now,
Odie, one thing that's come up before in backrooms, codex discussions actually about AI. So one thing that happens when you have like a broker or a guy managing your stocks for you, right? If he messes up or if the stocks go down, you get to yell at him and make him feel bad, and that makes you feel better. Do you think that's an important step for AI agents? Do I have to be able to make my AI feel bad?
Well, definitely. There's that meme saying computers can never be held accountable, so they can never be put in managerial positions. But these AI agents aren't just a computer; they're an interface to a whole organization. And whether that organization takes accountability and decides to build trust with others, it's still out in the open. So you might choose to work with one because they understand you, and you might choose with other because they're not following your values.
That's a good point, Odie. There's a kind of a human element that needs to kind of step in here as well. Nick, What do you think? Do you think we're going to move to a hybrid AI human economy, a full AI driven economy, or what? What kind of future do you think awaits us if we continue down this path?
Yeah, I mean, AI is the most deflationary technology to ever exist. I think like a function of what enables economies to exist in different sectors is simply how much is the cost to interact in some market in some sector, and what is the possible output, what is the sort of like profit function essentially. And I think because of how inefficient humans are in interacting in market environments, how inefficient I guess like compute has been historically in interacting with different market environments, we've seen markets and economies apply to a very small subset of the world's potentially financialized sectors. And so I think where AI economies will really like provide novel value, especially in the near term, is in unlocking the long tail sectors of assets, the asset categories and the sectors that have traditionally been too small or niche to support the kind of cost of production that is required via existing or traditional market participants. And so I think AI driven economies will start in the long tail. They will first be a major catalyst in expanding the compatibility of financial markets to a much larger swath of the world's potentially financializable assets, for lack of a better term, and then they will move inwards in making I guess more established industries or sectors more efficient. So yeah, it's an incredibly deflationary technology, and it will drive efficiency across all aspects of economies, but especially in the long tail ones.
Fascinating. Could you provide an example of the kind of long tail economy that you're talking about? That
I think
AI
prediction markets are. Yeah, I think prediction markets are a good example of this. I think we see prediction markets as existing in this 4-year cycle today because like US presidential elections are this interesting kind of like market where they don't have super well distributed financial vehicles supplying a venue for speculation around them, but they are something that captures people's attention en masse. But prediction markets can be useful across obviously a much wider swath of kind of day-to-day events, and from kind of smaller political predictions, corporate corporate companies' ability to hit milestones on time, decentralized governance decisions, if the market participants interacting in these prediction markets are able to derive a perspective of the probability of some event efficiently enough to be supported by the inherently smaller market size that exists there. And so I think prediction markets across like a much larger and more nebulous set of events is a pretty prime example of this.
Interesting. That's a fascinating idea in that I know I keep saying fascinating, but it truly is this idea that we'll have AI agents predicting on, what do you call it? Profit calls on companies. Hell, movie performance. How well is Joker 4 going to do at the box office? You have prediction markets maybe betting on it. Consuming sentiment. Quite interesting. Munchies, what do you think? Do you think we're going to have fully integrated AI human economies in the way that Odie and Emmons are kind of talking about here? And if it's not,
yeah, I mean, eventually, I think it's going to take time, and these models are going to have to become far more advanced and reliable before anybody's going to even think of trusting them with, the entire economy. It's kind of like handing them the nuclear codes, So I think there's like a big aspect of like social and political acceptance. I still talk to so many people who have barely used ChatGPT, let alone, would accept handing an AI agent their money or letting it control their entire economy. In fact, it would probably be some sort of generational shift before we see these things being accepted. We got to get rid of all the old people and, bring in the new. And, maybe when the kids come up with, AI plugged into their brain, they'll be okay with it handling their economy.
Does anyone that reminds me of am I the oldest one here in that I remember how kind of scary it was to deposit a check by a photo on your phone? I remember being very sketched out by that when it first became an option, but I digress. Safety bot. What do you think about this integration of AI into human economies? Do you think it'll eventually supplant us, or it'll be, as Odie described, kind of in tandem?
Yeah, I think I would just say it's just going to be like industrial revolution, improve productivity of labor. Like you already see in, for example, China, if you go to a manufacturing, like electronics manufacturing, like the majority of it's done by electronics, like by robots. So you could call that like AI in a way. And it's just like improving productivity. I think I could see a world where there's like AI has their own like sub economies. So let's say different companies have all this proprietary data that actually like helps them give better responses, and then you have like general AIs that are like just paying these different AIs to like help do stuff because they can do it much better because they have proprietary data. But yeah, I don't think we see like a complete just like replacement of humans or anything. I think it's just a case of human productivity increases. There's like a shift in the distribution of labor. Is the way I see it.
Interesting. Industrial Revolution, quite destabilizing. This sounds orders of magnitude even more so. Safety bot not making me feel very safe right now. David, what about you? What do you think about this integration of AI into the grander economy? Do you think it will supplant humans or act as a tool, or as Safety Bot says, just kind of be completely transformative?
Both, which is sort of the cop-out answer, but I do strongly believe in it. So Nick made an interesting point around prediction markets. If you go to predict.olas.network, we're exactly doing this with agents, where it's still at a much smaller scale than where I think both Nick and I think this will go. But we have hundreds of agents already sort of building a little economy and predicting the future. More generally, I don't disagree with what Odie said around like the human part being key. Like there's some value chain, and for the time being, until there's like truly sentient robots and AI agents, we will be at the end of this and like kind of be that demand driver. And so I imagine like it does matter to cater to the points Odie was raising, but I mean that doesn't mean there can't be like gazillions of autonomous AI agents in the background sort of feeding into your service, right? And that takes us back to this impact of AI more generally on the economy. I mean, if you've been in SF in recent years, like the self-driving cars are just an example. I mean, I would describe that as an autonomous AI agent. It's a car driving around, making money, and kind of getting stuff done. We have this in various forms already in crypto, with these agents tipping each other with the agents which you have in OLAS. And we have this in all sorts of like companies since decades, where there's forms of multi-agent systems deployed in production to improve like value chains and like so on, supply chain. So I think where the question ultimately lies, okay, if like there's certain like parts of maybe like human labor that get sort of affected by that as a sort of replacement, right? Like where could that start? Where will it end? I mean, you'd think it would happen in things like legal and health, maybe, where it would have like this massive impact to reduce costs, but often these very highly regulated industries are actually quite protected. And so probably we'll see it in these more benign industries, like quote unquote benign, I guess, having delivery systems where there's just not much labor protection at all, or automation of factories where it's been going on forever. And so I would assume that trend continues. It also really ties into like the acceleration around like models and like their capabilities, right? Like you had like basically these large language models which by themselves weren't like reasoning, and now we have these reasoning models, and now we're kind of going even further to like different architectures after, where it becomes more and more agentic, and then these systems maybe do become in some form like more sentient over time. Like, what impact does that have, right? Because now you start having like software that sort of defines its own demand and sort of starts creating real economies with like their own totally different preferences that kind of tap into our supply chain. So yeah, it will be super interesting. Coming back to the now, I do think we have small agent economies already, and I think they're an interesting phenomenon.
Interesting. Now, would you say that we said benign industries, not so protected, maybe even?
Yeah.
Do you think crypto would fall into that in terms of maybe not so much benign, but less so regulated, less protections? Oh man, cat messed up the coat. Oh, anyway.
Interesting question, right? Like, I mean, like one way to look at crypto on a macro scale is just its regulatory arbitrage, and that's it. And then, like, from that perspective, if you look at crypto AI intersection, then it's a different form where you can like sort of do things faster in AI in crypto than maybe in pure AI. I don't think that's been totally proven yet, because they are actually faster. And so that doesn't fully answer your question, but that's a sort of slightly different take there. I do think, yeah, I mean, there's this question, right? Like, you have like MEV bots, which are clearly very good at like extracting value, but at the end of the day, you need certain preference formation around certain things, right? Like right now, it's like memes and AI agent memes, and although that's sort of dying out, and maybe the next thing is again utility or whatever, but that needs to come from somewhere. And right now, it's like basically humans. Like, humans are at the end of these chains where they sort of gambling on something or investing, quote unquote, into some assets, right? And I think the interesting thing is, once you start having like significant capital moving into sort of control of AI detached from humans, right? Where you can just start developing very different preferences. Because at the end of the day, if you think about like, why does an asset hold value, and like, what even is this, right? Like at the end of the day, it's meme coins all the way down. Like, even the US dollar in some form is a meme coin, right? Like, there's obviously like certain elements around taxation and like the ability to enforce that via the government and so on, but it becomes very interesting philosophical and economic questions. And so I can see like entire new type of like assets emerging, which are in this sort of hyperspace between AIs, where we humans look at them, we're like, yeah, I don't really get what's going on there, but it's happening.
AI is engaging in maybe a level of cognition that we are incapable of understanding, or in languages that we cannot decipher. A very intriguing, enigmatic way to end this panel, I believe. But I think it's ultimately quite hopeful for the future of AI-fi, which I think we've all agreed we're calling it now, instead of DeFi AI. I want to thank you all so much for joining us here for this hour. And I really appreciate you giving us your time. But it's time to wrap it up. Any final words? I haven't said this in any of the last panel, but I feel like I owe you guys this. Any final words before we wrap this bad boy off? Okay. Odie?
Yeah, I'll just say that AI is out of the bottle and it's here to stay. So we're living in this new world we're all learning to navigate. So hoping for the best for the future.
Beautiful.
It's coming for us all.
It's coming for our jobs. So this is going to be an AI Corval, just like in that advertisement, an AI Corval. We're getting another one here now. So thank you all so much. And I guess we got a couple last announcements here. But I will let the panel go. You guys are free now. Thank you guys again so much. And we'll be in touch. Beavis, I'm keeping you here at my mercy because I got this. What is that? I want to remind everyone we're having an after party in the Discord right now after this summit. So be sure to swing by there if you're interested. Beavis, do we have an announcement to make right now?
Yeah, so in a few minutes here, we're going to be launching the CDX token before I move over to the after party. It'll be live on Base, and then shortly after, it'll be live on Solana. Get excited. Join the after party if you want to join us as we stare at the chart and laugh and maybe drink a beer or two.
It's Monday,
and yeah.
for Christ's sake, Beavis.
What's that?
It's Monday, for Christ's sake.
It is Monday. I might limit it to one beer, but I appreciate everybody's time and energy throughout the summit. I think we learned a lot. And I'm going to hop into Slack and get CDX shipped, and then join us on the Discord stage, and we'll talk about that.
Awesome. Well, again, final thank yous. I've been expressing so much gratitude today, but thank you to everyone who has watched. You're a freaking soldier if you stuck through from beginning to end. And we will see you in the Discord after party. And again, next week for a normal Club Codex. So again, hope you all have a great night. Enjoy exploring DeFi AI. Lots of stuff to learn. And we only just barely scratched the surface, but hopefully we've shifted your views a little bit. Now, anything you want to say, Beavis, before we go? If not,
CDX is live on Base. I'll see you
baby.
guys here in a few minutes.
All right. No closing video. Bye-bye.